Chapter 858. These are the clothes for your son. My wife helped me pick them. After laughing in the airport lobby for a while, they decided to go to eat double-cooked pork, and then everyone returned to their cars. Among Jiang Hai's group, only Jiang Hai and Xiang Hua did not have a car in Bing City, so the two of them got in Fu Yuan's car, and the others drove their own cars. Now cars were cheap. The cars these people drove were cheap, expensive, and so on. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai also gave the stack of children's clothes in his backpack to Xiang Hua, and Xiang Hua took it with a smile. Xiang Hua didn't understand these things. In his opinion, these children's clothes were just of good quality. However, Fu Yuan, whose family was well off, could recognize that these clothes were basically only from two brands, Bonpoint and Teeny Weenie, both of which were luxury brands in the children's clothing industry. Each piece of children's clothes cost a few thousand, and these were still considered cheap. Jiang Hai, you are really rich. This stack of clothes is almost tens of thousands. Looking at these clothes, Fu Yuan said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Xiang Hua was shocked. He really couldn't see that these things were worth tens of thousands. Oh, it's not much money. If you have children in the future, you will also have money. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai patted his chair and said with a smile. For Jiang Hai, this money was really just a small amount of money, and there was no need to add too much pressure to Xiang Hua. But obviously Jiang Hai thought too much. After Xiang Hua learned that these clothes were worth so much money, he did not say that he was afraid of the pressure. Instead, he looked at them with curiosity. Jiang Hai thought that if it were not for the fact that he couldn't fit into them, he might have tried them. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's good to be so carefree. Along the way, the three of them talked and laughed. Soon they came to the place where Jiang Hai wanted to eat double-cooked pork. Jiang Hai should have introduced his favorite dish in detail. This dish was invented in Bing City, and the most famous one was the chef's house. Legend has it that this dish appeared because of a chef from the Daotai province. Since Bingqing was located in the Heilongjiang province, it was close to the Soviet Union since ancient times. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the military strength of the Soviet Union put a lot of pressure on Wuxia. As the front line, the officials at the end of the Qing dynasty were interested in making friends with the Soviet Union. The Daotai here often entertained Russians, but everyone knew that the food of foreigners was mainly sour and sweet. Therefore, the chef at that time improved the salty and fresh spicy grilled pork strips and made it into double-cooked pork slices. At first, it was called double-cooked pork slices, but because the Soviets said that the sound of exploding pork slices was bun, it was renamed double-cooked pork slices. This dish could be said to be the most famous dish in Bing City. Other than this dish, it should be demori fish stew. Jiang Hai likes this dish very much. That's why every time he returns to Bing City, he would eat this dish many times. At the restaurant, everyone ordered. There were a total of 7 people and 6 dishes were enough. It was not that Jiang Hai and the rest were stingy. Everyone who had been to Bing City knew that if they went to some restaurants in Bing City, the size of the dishes would scare them to death. It was not rare for 2 people to eat one dish in Bing City. To put it bluntly, a dish in Bing City was comparable to 3 dishes in Shanghai. This was because the people in Bing City were used to eating this way. Therefore, the living expenses in Bing City were not considered high. Of course, the income was also much lower than Shanghai, Jiangsu, and Zhejiang. It was at least 1/3 or even half of the income. The difference was huge. After the dishes were served, Jiang Hai and the rest stopped chatting and started to eat. After a bowl of rice, the dishes in front of them were almost finished. Because everyone except Jiang Hai and Xiang Hua drove, no one drank. They only drank some soft drinks and water. It's only 6 o'clock now. Do you want to go out and have some fun? Seeing that everyone was almost full, Huang Yunfei took a sip of water and then said mysteriously to the people in front of him. Hearing his words, the faces of the people here were a little strange. Jiang Hai looked at these people. He naturally knew what Huang Yunfei meant by having some fun. Since Jiang Hai's family had that accident, he also deliberately alienated these friends because he felt a little embarrassed. He could not hang out with them. After all, when he was most worried, he could not even eat. But Huang Yunfei, Wang Yong, and Wu Ming had always been in contact with each other because the 3 of them had a common hobby, playing. Of course, the playing here was not to play games, but to play some special professions that all men knew. Jiang Hai had played before when he was in the United States, but he had not been there for a long time. Because he had a lot of girls in his family, he did not need to go out to hunt for these wild animals. In addition, he had dealt with 2 girls last night, so he did not really want to go now. But when he saw that the others did not object, he did not say anything. It did not matter if he went. They were going out to play together. He did not need to be a wet blanket. Sure, but where are we going? There is no good place recently. Hearing Huang Yunfei's words, Wang Yong thought for a moment and said hesitantly. He was also a master in this field, and the reason why he liked his girlfriend so much was actually related to this. His girlfriend knew that he liked to go to these places, but she did not make him wear a green hat and she did not leave him. Wang Yong's family opened a small clothing factory. It was very busy and tiring in the summer. Every day he would be busy until the second midnight. In the winter there was nothing to do. He had to rely on himself, but his girlfriend had never left him, so he had to have a good relationship with them. I know a place that is okay and it is cheap. Hearing the words of the two, Wu Ming thought for a moment and said. Wu Ming was the last to join Jiang Hai's gang, but he was the first to get married. Now his son was 3 years old. He entered this line under Wang Yong, but it seemed that he should have graduated from the apprenticeship now, and he was better than the master. Stop. I don't want to go to the cheap place. I have a harem. I don't want to get into any trouble. As soon as he heard Wu Ming's words, Jiang Hai raised his hand and stopped. He knew his own situation. He didn't like to wear a raincoat. If he went to those cheap places and got infected with something, then he would be sorry for his women. Of course, with Jiang Hai's current physical fitness, it was estimated that he would not get infected with any diseases, but who could say for sure? I know a place. There are cheap and expensive places. What level of consumption do you want? It depends on the situation. At this time, Fu Yuan thought for a moment and said. Hearing what he said, everyone was quite interested. Then let's go and have a look. Seeing that everyone seemed to be interested, Huang Yunfei on this side also spoke first. Then, under his urging, Wang Yong went to pay the bill, and then they got in the car and went to the place mentioned by Fu Yuan. Along the way, Huang Yunfei also added Jiang Hai to a WeChat group. They talked about all kinds of information about some of Bing City's specialty industries. Now, the professional women in this business were basically distributed in several places. Otherwise, they would go to the lowest-end places like hair salons, massage parlors, and the like. These were also cheap. The better ones were some dark bathing centers. The price was at least twice as expensive as hair salons. The quality might be slightly better, but it was basically the same. But if you want to go to the best places, you have to go to the clubhouse. Yes, in the past such places were often called nightclubs, clubs, and the like. But now they were called clubhouses. This time Fu Yuan brought Jiang Hai and the others to a club. On the surface it was a place for singing. Of course it was also a place for singing. But when singing, there would always be some girls who would come and accompany you in singing and so on. At this time they had to separate. Different appearances, different grades, and naturally the price was different. What was the grade, what was the price, how much was a night, how much was a session, etc. Jiang Hai was a little confused when he heard this. He really didn't know that there was such a thing. Soon, Fu Yuan drove Jiang Hai and the others to the most development area, parked in front of a clubhouse, and then walked up with familiarity. The waiters outside the door were very energetic and polite. They even helped to press the elevator button. Not long after, Fu Yuan brought Jiang Hai and the others to that floor. As soon as they got off the elevator, they saw 2 rows of girls wearing cheongsams with waist-length slits and black shawls. They stood there neatly. When they saw Jiang Hai and the others coming down, they said loudly, "Welcome to XXX Clubhouse." This lineup made Xiang Hua and the others, who had never been here before, a little confused. "Yo, you guys, do you have a reservation?" At this moment, a middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 50s came over with a smile. This guy was wearing a pink sequin suit, and his hair was dyed blonde with white. Looking at his smile, Jiang Hai didn't know why he wanted to punch him. "No, are there any big rooms?" As Fu Yuan spoke, he took out a red RMB from his pocket and handed it over. The middle-aged man took it with a smile and naturally put it in his arms. "Of course there are. Are you VIPs? Come at any time. This way, please." After receiving the money, the middle-aged man smiled and led Jiang Hai and the others to the private room inside. Not long after, they came to a private room. Jiang Hai glanced inside. He had to admit that the private room here was very big. The lights inside were not as dark as the KTV when he went to sing before. Instead, it was very bright. The leather sofa and the big TV all showed that this place was very high-end. Chapter 859. Come and take a look at this place. We have the most luxurious VIP private room here. It costs 1,888 yuan. I think all the bosses here are rich and won't make things difficult for us. After leading Jiang Hai and the others to the private room, the middle-aged man spoke with a somewhat strange Mandarin with a smug look on his face. "F***ck, I haven't even entered the house and it's already 2,000? Hearing what he said, Wang Yong and the others, who were used to getting 150 a day by the roadside and 600 a day by the better ones, couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't help but cry out softly. It's fine. I'm just here to have fun. I'm quite interested in this place. I'll pay for the room. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai waved his hand. Since they were out to play, he didn't need to be as stingy as before. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone was silent. The middle-aged man also laughed. It had to be known that these people all had commissions. There was a commission for the private room fee, and so did those professional women. According to the previous Hong Kong movies, this middle-aged man was the legendary Mumu Sang. Come, come, come. Everyone take a seat first. The 1888 VIP room is quite suitable. We'll give you a fruit platter for free. We'll give you as much as you eat. Now let's take a look and order some wine. After letting Jiang Hai and the others in and sit down, the middle-aged man here smiled and handed over a lot of drinks list. Jiang Hai also glanced at it. There were 2 options written on it, single order and set meal. However, the price of the wine made even Jiang Hai raise his eyebrows. The wine on the list was divided into 3 grades: beer, foreign wine and red wine. However, the cheapest bottle of Corona cost 400 yuan, and the best grade, Remy Martin XO, cost 20,000 yuan. Was this guy trying to scare Jiang Hai that he had never drunk foreign wine before? Or were there too many rich people in the country? 20,000? What the hell was wrong with this guy's head? A bottle of XO cost less than $200 overseas. You could even buy it in supermarkets. 20,000 here? It shouldn't sell for more than 2,200 yuan in China. 10 times the price? What the hell was this? When they saw the wine on the table, not only Jiang Hai, but the others also looked at Fu Yuan as if they had seen a ghost. If it weren't for the fact that they had played together since they were young, they would have really suspected that this guy was a fake. Ahem, the wine on the list is not only the wine, but also the money of those professional women. The single order is for a one-time meal, and the set meal is for the whole night. Looking at everyone's gaze, Fu Yuan coughed lightly and said slowly. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, everyone understood. So that's what he meant. 400 yuan for a haul of beer wasn't considered expensive. It seems that this isn't the first time this boss has come to our place. Our recent set meal is more suitable. Recently, in order to celebrate the National Day, my store manager has given a big discount. For a set meal that costs more than 5,000 yuan, in addition to the main dish, we also have a small snack. They are all newcomers. Their skills may be average, but they are very good. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, the middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. What the hell, what does this have to do with the National Day? Giving him a middle finger, Jiang Hai and the others here were so angry that they laughed. Is this how you celebrate the National Day? Now it's really a holiday and you want to have a promotion. This industry is also doing it. AI, the economy is not good. It's not like you don't know. It's better to have something cheap than nothing. Come on, what do you want to order? Shrugging pitifully, the middle-aged man said helplessly, and then asked the crowd. I'll go to the beer bar and see what's going on first. Among the crowd, Xiang Hua, who had the least bullets in his pocket, was the first to speak. 400 yuan was still within his acceptable range. He couldn't afford it if it was more expensive. I'll go to the beer bar. Hearing his words, Su Wei couldn't help but speak immediately. Come on, I'll have this. This is 600 yuan beer. Is there any difference between 600 yuan and 400 yuan? Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, Wu Ming thought about it and said to him. There is a difference of 200 yuan. There is not much of a difference. The people are the same, but the life is different. But you can rest assured that our beer is also quite good. While writing, the middle-aged man here also said with a smile. I'll also give it a try for 600 yuan. 600 yuan was still within the acceptable range. Wang Yong thought about it and said. I'll have the most expensive one. Come on, I want this 1,500 yuan. When it was Huang Yunfei's turn, he couldn't help but grit his teeth and said to the middle-aged man. Hearing his words, the middle-aged man also smiled. Although he also made some money, how could he make more than 1,000 yuan? What he mentioned was the same. How can 600 yuan and 1,500 yuan be the same thing? I'll have 1,000 yuan. When it was Fu Yuan's turn, he looked at it, then calculated the money in his pocket and said to the middle-aged man. There are rules for doing this kind of thing. For example, eating and drinking can be treated to buy buddies, but doing this kind of thing can't be treated. Everyone is doing their own thing, so everyone is thinking about how much money they have in their pockets. Boss, what about you? Seeing that the 6 people have finished choosing, the middle-aged man also came in front of Jiang Hai and asked him. If Jiang Hai wants to play, naturally he won't play those cheap ones. Give me the best one, 20,000 yuan. After that, Jiang Hai's finger pointed to the top line. I'll make it up, 20,000 yuan? Jiang Hai, are you crazy? You want to play this kind of game and you want to spend 20,000 yuan? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone here was stunned. Jiang Hai is really rich. They really didn't expect that Jiang Hai would spend 20,000 yuan. I'm just playing, I don't care much about this small amount of money. Just this one. Waving his hand with a smile, Jiang Hai was also a little curious. With his wealth, not to mention 20,000 yuan, 200,000 yuan, 2 million yuan. 2 million yuan, he has to think about it, but he doesn't have any pressure for less than 200,000 yuan. He doesn't say that he has a lot of money, but he definitely has a lot of money. Well, we don't understand the world of the nouveau riche. Go down and arrange it. Don't fool us with those inferior goods. I have been here more than once or twice. Seeing that Jiang Hai has chosen, Fu Yuan also said seriously. Of course, lend me some courage, I don't dare to fool the bosses. This boss, 20,000 yuan is the set meal. I'll go down and prepare it for you right away. Wait for me, I'll be right there. Listening to Fu Yuan's words, the man's face was full of wrinkles and said, by the way, call a princess to pour us wine and order songs. Seeing that the man was about to leave, Fu Yuan couldn't help but add another sentence. After the man made an okay gesture, he quickly left. Not long after, a girl in a woman's suit came in. This person is not a professional woman, this is a princess. The so-called princess is not a professional woman, but a person who specializes in pouring wine and ordering songs for the guests in the private room. She relies on the rewards of the guests to make a living. There is no commission for the wine. Of course, she will not accompany the guests to do anything. She can't even touch them. The minimum reward for the princess is 300 yuan. Of course, if she is pleasing to the eye, it doesn't matter if it is higher. As for how high it is, she will tell you. It depends on her own ideas, but Jiang Hai won't do such a boring thing. Soon the wine was served first. The wine ordered, in addition to the extras, naturally also had wine. It seems that everyone is ready to drink. They have probably asked for leave tonight. The wine they ordered just now can't be served here. They must go to a hotel outside to get a room and then study the contents of the wine. They also can't book a room for an hour or a night. Tonight they will be staying there. That's why it's fine to drink some wine now. Of the 4 who ordered beer, it was naturally impossible for one person to drink a whole hall. Jiang Hai also ordered 2 bottles of beer. After the beer was served, not long after, the middle-aged man came over with a row of professional women. Compared to the princess, these professional women are dressed more simply. It's already the end of October. It was already very cold in Bing City. It was now night time and the temperature was below 0. Although there was a heater in the private room, it was not very hot. At least Fu Yuan and the rest were wearing jackets and did not feel hot. But these professional women were all wearing hot pants or miniskirts. The short miniskirts that showed off their thighs and tummies. If they were not wearing a vest, they were wearing a shirt. It was very seductive, and their looks were all very similar to those of the professional women. Although they don't have the kind of stunning feeling at a glance, at least they are not ugly. The quality is good. Seeing these girls come over, Xiang Hua spoke first. This quality is comparable to 800 yuan in other places. Wu Ming also whispered. He was also very satisfied with the appearance. Everyone, these are the beer quality girls. If there is anyone you like, you can tell me at any time. Nearly 20 girls came in and lined up in front of Jiang Hai. Then the middle-aged pervert came out again and shouted loudly. Listening to his words, Xiang Hua, Su Wei, Wang Yong, and Wu Ming on the other side carefully picked the girls. Not long after, they selected 4 girls. The girls also nodded to them, then sweetly called them boss and then sat next to them. These girls earned not only the money for the beer, but also the commission for the wine. They saw that Jiang Hai asked for another 2 bottles of beer. The 4 of them divided it equally, and each of them got an extra 100 to 200 yuan. Seeing that the people on the beer side were done, the pervert left with the rest of the people. Fu Yuan and Huang Yunfei were even more excited at this time. The beer quality is already so good. Their wine he. Chapter 860. Hello bosses. Just as Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan were looking forward to it, the middle-aged man outside the door came in again. This time he only brought 6 or 7 girls with him. However, even Huang Yunfei could see that the quality of the girls were better than the ones from beer. Not only were their faces very good, the makeup on their faces wasn't particularly thick, unlike the ones from beer. It was obvious that the makeup on their faces was heavier. Without the makeup, you wouldn't be able to tell what they looked like. Moreover, the makeup on these girls was relatively light. It can be seen that they were very confident in their looks. In addition to their looks, their figures were also better than those girls just now. Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan couldn't help but be tempted. The reason why Fu Yuan knew about this place was because of his job. Fu Yuan's job was road inspection. That was to say, after someone repaired a road and a bridge, they would be sent to test it and issue a test report. Then they would be considered qualified. In this line of work, they naturally had to curry favor with the higher-ups. Otherwise, if those officials said that you were not qualified to do this line of work, then you really were not qualified to do this line of work. And their so-called earning money was to do a test when they went there. Those who knew how to be a good person would give him some money in addition to the company's money. This was also his main source of income. He came here to accompany a client. This place was designated by the client. Otherwise he wouldn't know. Second from the left. First from the right. After the people stood, Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan's eyes were like scanners, sweeping over the girls in front of them. It didn't take long for them to choose the one they liked. "Thank you, boss." Hearing that they were chosen, the two girls over there couldn't help but nod. Then they called out sweetly, walked to the two men's side and sat down. In the end, only Jiang Hai's best was left. To be honest, it looked like thousands of girls had this level. The others also became interested in Jiang Hai's. What was the best? They also wanted to see it. However, even though they wanted to experience it, they weren't going to sit around and do nothing. With the arrival of the girls, the atmosphere in the room rose again. As a man with a girl sitting next to him, it would be strange if his heart didn't race like a horse. For a moment, they were no longer satisfied with their words. Their hands unconsciously climbed onto each other's waists and legs. Their elbows occasionally rubbed against each other's indescribable places. But these girls didn't care. There was an even more intense activity coming up, so what was this? Therefore they were very open and played with them. At the same time, they also asked about the situation of these people. According to them, this was called communicating first. After all, it was not a roadside stall where they could leave after eating. They still had time to play. At the same time, many girls went to the karaoke counter to sing and dance. The atmosphere was very lively. But at this moment, the middle-aged pervert walked in again, this time with 4 girls. When the 4 girls appeared, Fu Yuan and the others couldn't help but scream. At the same time, they stared at the 4 girls. They had to admit that 20,000 yuan was indeed worthy of its price. With this price, there was nothing to say about the quality. These 4 girls in Jiang Hai's eyes were about 80 points. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were third-rate stars. They were almost on the same level as Aphrodite and the others in his manner, but one side was a foreign girl and the other side was a Wuxia girl. When Jiang Hai saw one of the 4 girls, he was stunned for a moment, then he looked at Su Wei in the distance. Su Wei also saw this girl and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he looked at Jiang Hai. It seemed that they recognized this girl. At this time, the middle-aged pervert also came over. "Boss, this is the main dish of our latest 20,000 yuan XO Remy Martin super set. These 4 are our top stars. Don't look at them just because they are beautiful and have a better figure. In fact, these 4 girls have a strong background. This girl is a former model, her figure can be said to be the best in our shop, and her temperament is cold and elegant. This girl is a graduate of the Imperial College of Music. Her voice will definitely make you feel that the 20,000 yuan is worth it. This girl is a graduate of the Shanghai Academy of Drama. She specializes in classical dance. She will make you feel like the emperor doesn't attend morning court." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the middle-aged man introduced them one by one, and Jiang Hai's eyes were mainly looking at the last person. After hearing the middle-aged man's introduction, Jiang Hai also pointed to the person who graduated from classical dance and said to the middle-aged man, "Okay, Huan, thank the boss." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man here immediately said with a smile, "Thank you, boss." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the girl named Huan couldn't help but smile at Jiang Hai, then she nodded and made a bow. It can only be said that she is worthy of practicing classical dance. She really has a classical style. Next is the trainee. "This is from us. Boss, take a look." After Huan bowed, she sat next to Jiang Hai, and the middle-aged man here took out an iPad from nowhere and handed it to Jiang Hai. There are many photos on this iPad. Of course, they are all photos of girls, similar to the existence of artistic photos, but the clothes are a little simple. Jiang Hai looked at these photos in front of him. He was a little stunned. Trainee? Now he is still struggling with this title. Trainee? What the hell is this training? AI life is like this. There is always a need for training. No one is born to be a professional woman, right? Therefore, our company is the same as some companies in South Korea. Professional women are divided into S, A, B, and C levels. The beer level is C level and the wine level is A and B level. Among them, a level refers to those who have more than 5,000 points. You are S level, and those who have just arrived and haven't reached C level are trainees. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man also said with a smile. Hearing what the middle-aged man said, Jiang Hai couldn't help sweating. It's really enough. I can't see the real person. How can I choose? But since it was a set meal, Jiang Hai didn't come here to pretend to be a saint. He lowered his head and looked at it, but to be honest, just looking at the photos, Jiang Hai really couldn't make up his mind. What kind of person does the boss like? If you like someone who is more innocent, you can choose her. She just came out of school. If you like someone who is more sexy, you can choose this. Her body is very good. If you also like someone like me, you can choose this. She is my junior. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little hesitant, Huan, who was sitting here, also came over and recommended to Jiang Hai with a smile. Jiang Hai looked at her strangely and finally chose her junior. Okay, today is really a happy ending. All the bosses actually chose at the first try. It's really a miracle. I'll arrange it right away. Seeing that Jiang Hai had chosen, the middle-aged man here also shouted loudly. Seeing that no one paid attention to him, he walked down a little awkwardly. Not long after, a girl in simple clothes appeared outside the door. She was different from those who had been on the battlefield for a long time. At this time she was still a little shy. She walked over and knocked on the door. After seeing Huan, she quickly ran over and then sat on the other side of Jiang Hai under Huan's signal. She just sat there, not talking or looking at people. However, Jiang Hai glanced at her. She was really good looking. What's the boss's name? Seeing that everyone was here, the atmosphere in the room rose again, and Huan also opened her mouth to talk. She poured a glass of wine for Jiang Hai, then asked Jiang Hai with a smile. My surname is Jiang. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also felt a little awkward and then said slowly, Hello, Boss Jiang. Where did Boss Jiang get rich? Hearing Jiang Hai's reply, she also smiled and then said, I'm abroad. You really don't know me? Chao Peng? Looking at the girl named Huan in front of him, Jiang Hai asked tentatively. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then she carefully looked at Jiang Hai. She was very sure that this person should know her since he called her name, but she really had no impression of him. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also smiled and waved his hand, then said to Huan, Hee, don't think about it. I'm your high school classmate, but we're not in the same class, so you shouldn't have any impression of me. Thinking of this, he really couldn't help but feel that the world had changed. Chao Peng used to be a famous person in high school. In her first year of high school, she was their freshman representative and joined the student union. Jiang Hai still had some impression of her. When she introduced herself on stage, she said that her name was Chao Peng. The name Peng was taken from a sentence in the National Wind, Chao Feng and Xia Quan. Peng Ping Shu Miao Inu Ointment. There was a king in the four countries, Sun Boji. At that time, Jiang Hai and Su Wei were just ordinary young people yawning under the stage, and she was a goddess. It was said that after she graduated, she went to Shanghai to learn dance. Her professional level was still very good. Later, it was said that she went to act in a stage play, but he didn't know what happened. Why did she come here now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chao Peng couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, but then she said with a smile, Hee, it seems that you are really classmates. It's a bit awkward to say that, but even if you are classmates, there won't be a discount. Chapter 861. Are you prey? We are hunters. Early in the morning, a shrill ringtone sounded. Jiang Hai groped for the bedside in a daze and found the phone that was still ringing from the pile of things. He glanced at the caller ID and couldn't help but pat his head. Mayor Wallace? Why is he looking for me so early in the morning? Glancing at Chao Peng and another girl named Xiao Zhua, who were still sleeping beside him, Jiang Hai hung up the phone first. Then he got up in a daze and went to the bathroom in the suite to wash his face. He looked at himself in the mirror and recalled the scene from last night. In fact, there was nothing to recall. After all, if he thought too much, it would be censored. Jiang Hai could only say that the atmosphere last night was good. Everyone left around 11 o'clock. Jiang Hai took Chao Peng and Xiao Zhua to the hotel together. In fact, Fu Yuan and the others were also here. It's just that they had booked an ordinary standard room, while Jiang Hai had booked a suite. After entering the room, there was no need to describe what they did in detail. They did a lot of things. Recalling Chao Peng and Xiao's was bodies, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little impulsive. He had to admit that the two girls' dancing skills were quite good. Their bodies were soft and flexible. As long as they wanted to do something, they could do it. For example, standing in a split air train and pincer attack. Cough, Jiang Hai didn't know what these idioms meant. They should be idioms? Anyway, his language wasn't good. After taking a shower in the bathroom, Jiang Hai left the bathroom and went outside to put on his clothes. Looking at the two girls who were still sleeping, he took out 30,000 yuan from his pocket and put it on the table. The 20,000 yuan from last night had already been paid when he left. Now the 30,000 yuan was specially taken out by Jiang Hai yesterday. It was a reward. After all, it let Jiang Hai experience a different kind of feeling. After putting the money away, Jiang Hai left. It was none of his business how they wanted to split the money. After leaving the room, Jiang Hai looked at the time. It was only 7 in the morning. Fu Yuan and the others didn't have work today, so they could sleep a little longer. Jiang Hai sent a voice message in the group, telling them to find him at the restaurant. After that, he went straight to the restaurant. After ordering a glass of milk and 2 sandwiches, Jiang Hai sat there and looked at his phone. After thinking for a while, he called Mayor Wallace. Although he didn't know why Mayor Wallace was looking for him, he thought that something must have happened. Hey Jiang Hai, I'm really sorry. I forgot that you went to the east. Haha, I hope I didn't disturb you. Hearing that Jiang Hai called back, Mayor Wallace also said with a smile. I did, but it doesn't matter. I'm up anyway. What's the matter, Mr. Mayor? Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai also rubbed his temples, and then asked him with a smile. Oh, I'm really sorry, but this matter still needs to be decided by you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also shrugged. Listening to his voice, he didn't sound very sorry. He said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Indeed, with his relationship with Jiang Hai, he wouldn't go to the line just because he woke up Jiang Hai. Well, tell me what's the matter. Listening to Mayor Wallace saying that he must make the decision, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He took a sip of milk and asked Mayor Wallace. He was really a little curious. The thing is, it's about the tourists who want to go hunting. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace thought for a while and said. The fact is mainly about the tourists who want to go hunting. Winthrop is not far from the Alabama mountains. Everyone knows that although there are many Americans, most of them are concentrated in the cities. Because the mechanization is quite powerful, there are not many people in the countryside outside the cities. In addition, the environmental protection is good. Of course, it refers to the protection in recent years. Therefore, wild animals from all over the United States often come out to cause trouble, such as crocodiles in the south, brown bears in the northwest, and wild boars and deer in the northeast, which is Jiang Hai's side. These are all disasters. Jiang Hai can hardly forget the deer disaster last year. He almost died. Now the head of the buck is still hanging in Jiang Hai's house. This is very dangerous. It is precisely because of last year's deer disaster that this year's weather forecast said that this year's winter will be colder than last year. Cold means that there is nothing to eat. The deer in the Alabama mountains are likely to go down the mountain. At the same time, there are also reports that this year, not only are there more deer in the Alabama mountains, but there are also more wild boars. Both of these animals may go down the mountain. And if the deer go down the mountain, it is possible that the carnivores that usually eat the deer will go down the mountain. In order to prevent this disaster, this year, the Massachusetts government ordered every town near the Alabama mountains to go into the mountains to hunt deer and wild boars. If a certain quota is reached, there will be space in the mountains to cope with the increase of deer and wild boars. It will also not be like the previous year, where they lost so much property and even casualties. After receiving this news, Mayor Wallace also sent this news to every family. Before it snows, they should quickly go and hunt deer. This way it will save them a lot of trouble. But after this news was sent out, many people who have homestays will inevitably let the tourists know. After the tourists know, they will report to the town through the villagers, hoping to participate in this hunting. After all, this is hunting. In China, except for the rich and powerful, almost no one hunts. Although they can play with guns in Winthrop's shooting range, shooting targets is not as fun as hunting animals. These people who often come to Winthrop to play are already a little restless. After learning about this matter, Mayor Wallace also felt a bit of a headache because it was not easy for him to talk about it. If he says no, it will affect the enthusiasm of these investors. But if he says yes, what if there is a problem? So he is also quite tangled. After thinking about it for a day, he suddenly thought of Jiang Hai, so he called Jiang Hai. He didn't expect to wake him up. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also thought for a while. It is not impossible. He gently knocked on the glass and asked these tourists to go into the mountains to hunt. The first thought that came to Jiang Hai's mind was no. What a joke, these people are tourists, Wuxia people, and they don't have a gun license. If there is a problem, who can they find to reason with? It is very likely that if there is a problem, not only Winthrop, but also Jiang Hai's soaring dragon manor will be affected. But on second thought, this may also be an opportunity to make money. What do you mean? Hearing Jiang Hai say that it is not impossible, Mayor Wallace was also stunned for a moment, then he asked with some doubts. Jiang Hai was also worried about what he was worried about. If there is an accident, then their Winthrop's reputation will be ruined. This matter still has to be discussed with the state. We can take the lead to do such a training. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai's mind was also thinking quickly. Soon he thought of a way. According to Jiang Hai's words, they can discuss with the state. They will provide tourists, and the state will be responsible for providing guns and guards, the so-called police and the like. They will play the role of protection and also play the role of supervision. As for the recruits, they had to undergo 3 days of military training. At the very least, they had to learn how to follow orders. This military training could be handled by the town's police station. After all, the police station also had its own playground and such. If they want to go hunting in the mountains, they will have to pay a deposit and sign a contract. If they are not obedient in the mountains, the deposit will be deducted. When the time comes, they can split the money with the state government. As for how much to split, it will be discussed later. But there is no doubt that even if it is split 28% with the state government, Jiang Hai is willing. This is because not only will they be going hunting, but it will also open up a tourism route for Winthrop. Most importantly, no one will carry camouflage, tactical vests, military bags, field tents, and so on from the country. When the time comes, this will also be a way to stimulate sales. Whether it is selling or renting, Winthrop will make a lot of money. Most importantly, these people who will participate in the hunting are all rich people. When the time came, using the deer that they had killed themselves to make deer head specimens or something, it would probably be very popular. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace on the other side was dumbfounded. Originally, he just wanted to find an opportunity to take these tourists to have fun, but he really didn't expect there to be so many twists and turns. As expected of a capitalist, you came up with a solution so quickly. Okay, I will talk to the state government tomorrow. Mayor Wallace also said with a smile. Jiang Hai's brain is really fast. I'll also ask Moses Adams to come along. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Just Mayor Wallace going to talk to those guys who are involved in politics? Jiang Hai is not assured. On the contrary, he will be relieved if Moses Adams goes. Mayor Wallace also knew his situation, so he agreed readily. After a few more pleasantries, Jiang Hai hung up the phone. When he hung up the phone, he found that the other people had already appeared in the restaurant, but they all looked sleepy. Jiang Hai also smiled. Over 25 years old, it is obvious that their physical strength can't keep up. Chapter 862. This is pretty good. I will definitely come again when I have time in the future, but the private room fee is a bit expensive. Sitting next to Jiang Hai's table, everyone ordered their own breakfast. While eating, Huang Yunfei said with a smile on his face. There are cheaper ones, there won't be so many people next time, so there is no need for such an expensive private room. Hearing his words, Su Wei also smiled and continued. The money for the private room and wine last night was paid by Jiang Hai, and he didn't care about this small amount of money. As for the money for the fun, of course they paid their own way because in this business, there is no such thing as treating. Then, everyone sat down and began to study the events of last night. Looking at them talking excitedly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head, feeling a little funny. These guys are really bored. After talking about last night's story, they began to study where to go today. I saw you on the phone just now, why are you in a hurry to go back? Looking at Jiang Hai, Su Wei couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai. In their view, Jiang Hai rarely comes back, so naturally he will stay for a while before going back, but Jiang Hai doesn't have so much time. Hearing what Su Wei said, Jiang Hai also nodded. Winthrop wants to organize tourists to go into the mountains to hunt, and I need to go back and talk to the state government. Are you interested in going back with me? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to them. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, a trace of expectation flashed in the eyes of everyone here, but it quickly disappeared. Although they want to go, the problem is that they really can't go. They still have to work and they don't have so much time. Since these buddies can't go, Jiang Hai also has to arrange his own itinerary. After returning to Bing City, he must visit Xianghua's son and Qi Li's mother. These are only 2 days. Jiang Hai's relatives, it's fine if he doesn't visit them. Anyway, he has no contact with them. As for his friends, it's about a week. After setting the time, Jiang Hai also called American Express. This is the power of his Centurion card. He can ask American Express to book a plane ticket for him from the capital to New York in a week. At the same time, he was also thinking about the problem he was thinking about when he came, the problem of buying a plane. So he explained his idea to American Express's customer service, after learning that Jiang Hai wants to buy a private plane. Less than a minute after American Express hung up, an invitation card appeared in Jiang Hai's email. Jiang Hai opened it and saw that it was an invitation from Boeing Civil Aviation, which is the subsidiary company of Boeing that produces civil aircraft. The invitation card said that they want to invite Jiang Hai to participate in a test flight. In fact, they knew that Jiang Hai wants to buy a plane, so they wanted to befriend him. The test flight was scheduled in a week. Jiang Hai just smiled. Anyway, he wants to buy a plane and he can just go and have a look. The test flight was held at Boeing's headquarters, Chicago. Jiang Hai can also go there directly. There are direct flights to Chicago from the capital, and Jiang Hai can change his flight. After confirming the invitation, Jiang Hai also called American Express to change his flight. After that, Jiang Hai started to have fun in Bing City. After learning that Jiang Hai will be leaving in a few days, his friends have been very cooperative with him. They have been hanging out with him every day. Except for the day when he went to Qi Li's house, Jiang Hai spent every day eating and drinking with his friends. They went to the movies, bowling, karaoke. Of course, this time it was vegetarian because he brought his family. Although the weather was cold, they still went to the riverside to have a barbecue. At the same time, Jiang Hai also experienced his fishing skills. He had to admit that although he had not fished for a long time, Jiang Hai's cooking skills had not deteriorated. Especially the fish food that was mixed with Reiki. Almost every fish caught was a hit. Although the grilled fish had frozen Jiang Hai's friends to death, everyone was still very happy. Jiang Hai's friends were still very cold. One must know that at this time, the temperature in Ice City was only a few degrees Celsius. To be honest, a week passed quickly. After agreeing to come back during the Spring Festival, Jiang Hai was ready to return to the US. Although this time he came back in a hurry, Jiang Hai was very happy. He bought some dried sausages, roasted sausages and red sausages and sent them back to Winthrop. Jiang Hai himself took a plane back to the capital. After spending a good night with Qi Li and Du Ning, Jiang Hai got on the plane to Chicago early the next morning. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai had his own small independent space. He watched a movie in it for a while. After feeling a little bored, he began to sleep. It was 10:10 a.m. when he took off. When he opened his eyes, it was 8 a.m. sharp. Yes, this was the time difference. After flying for 10 hours, he was still in the sky. However, it was daytime here and it was also daytime in Chicago. Jiang Hai went to the bathroom he booked and took a shower. After that, he returned to his room and waited for the plane to land. Not long after, the plane landed smoothly at Chicago O'Hare International Airport amidst a tremor. After connecting to the covered bridge, Jiang Hai and the other VIPs got off the plane first. As soon as Jiang Hai walked out of the hall, he saw a woman in a black suit from a distance. She was in the airport's reception hall, holding a sign with Jiang Hai's Chinese written on it. At this time, she lowered her head and seemed to be searching for flight information on her mobile phone. Jiang Hai looked around. She might be here to pick him up, although he was not sure if someone was here to pick him up. "Hello, are you here to pick up Jiang Hai?" Walking over, Jiang Hai asked the woman. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman also raised her head. After seeing Jiang Hai, she nodded excitedly. "Yeah, it's you, Jiang. Hello, I have your photo. I was specially arranged by American Express to pick you up. My name is Audrey Bach. Don't you think my voice is familiar? I'm your American Express operator." Seeing Jiang Hai come over, the woman immediately said excitedly. Hearing her say this, Jiang Hai associated the voice on the other side of the phone. In fact, when Jiang Hai first got the Centurion Black Gold card, he also fantasized about who the woman on the other side of the phone was. But considering that a sweet voice did not necessarily mean that she was beautiful, this could be proven by countless voice actors. So over time, Jiang Hai gave up on fantasizing. Plus, there were many women around him, so there was no need to fantasize. But now it seems that this girl is really good. She is a typical American girl. Her long blonde hair is tied behind her head. She is about 1.75 meters tall. Of course, probably because she is wearing high heels, her feet look about 1.60 meters tall. She is a little petite. She has big blue eyes, a sharp chin, and some small freckles on her face, which makes her look young. She is a little thin and not too plump, but overall she is a beauty. Jiang Hai is not interested in her, but after all, it is also a very happy thing to be with a beautiful woman. Hello, Miss Bach. Hearing her rapid voice, Jiang Hai also smiled and stretched out his hand. Hello. Maybe she also felt that her appearance was a little unladylike. Audrey Bach also stuck out her tongue a little embarrassedly, and then gently shook hands with Jiang Hai. My car is outside. Your itinerary here has been arranged by Boeing. Let me help you carry your things. After shaking hands, Audrey Bach calmed down a little. She smiled and wanted to take Jiang Hai's backpack, but Jiang Hai stepped back and let go of her hand. I'll carry it. This is not what a gentleman should do. Smiling at Audrey Bach, Jiang Hai said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai say so, Audrey Bach also nodded with a smile, and then took Jiang Hai outside the airport. Chicago also belongs to the north of the eastern United States. The weather is a little cold now. As soon as they left the departure hall, Audrey Bach shivered. But for Jiang Hai, this kind of temperature didn't matter. He tightened his backpack and followed the little beauty in front of him. They got into a red Beetle and sat in the passenger seat. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to sit in such a car. Because it was a little small, Jiang Hai was nearly 2 meters tall. It was okay to sit in an SUV, but to sit in such a car, make do. In fact, the interior space of this car was very large, but Jiang Hai felt that it was a little small when he sat in it. But Audrey Bach didn't feel it. After sitting in the car, she started the engine and went to the center of Chicago. While driving, she was talking to Jiang Hai. It seems that she really likes to talk. Listening to her talking, Jiang Hai was a little sleepy. Fortunately, the scenery of Chicago was different from that of Boston, so Jiang Hai was not bored looking at the street scenery. Mr. Jiang, do you know? You are my savior, my idol. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't reply, Audrey Bach suddenly said to Jiang Hai seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned. Oh, what do you mean? Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It seems that they have met for the first time. When I first entered the American Express company, I was an intern. After a year of internship, I had the opportunity to connect with you. To be honest, no one was willing to connect with you because your information wasn't a secret. You didn't have any net worth and only had a total of 300 million or so, but you bought a manor for 280 million. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Audrey Bach began to recall her past, making Jiang Hai feel a bit embarrassed. That's right, Audrey Bach. Audrey Bach began to recall her past, making Jiang Hai a bit embarrassed. Chapter 863. In the beginning he was indeed quite stupid. He didn't even know that he was crazy to spend 280 million on such a crappy place. If he went to New Mexico, 280 million would be enough to cover half of New Mexico. Of course, this was a joke, but at least the territory would be 5 times bigger than it is now. New Mexico, Florida, Miami, and so on. These southern states have a lot of empty land, and because they are places of immigration, naturally, there is no racial discrimination or anything like that. If he went there, Jiang Hai would even be a local tyrant. Of course, he was also a local tyrant here. But at that time, his brain was indeed a little too big. No wonder American Express didn't think highly of him. In 1 year, you went from $300 million to more than $1 billion. After another year, more than $1 billion became more than $3 billion. Now it's almost $5 billion. Oh, by the way, your cash now is about $4 billion. You just bought a company in Wuxia. I almost forgot. Seeing that Jiang Hai was listening to her, Audrey Bach also said excitedly, Our salary and performance are related to our clients. I originally thought that with you, I would have no hope of buying a house or a car for the rest of my life. But I didn't expect that in just 3 years I would be able to buy a house in New York. I just changed my car last month. It's all thanks to you. That's why I said that you are my savior and my idol. If you have any requests, you can come to me. I can help you solve all your problems. I can solve all your problems. Looking at Jiang Hai, Audrey Bach also said excitedly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai just chuckled and didn't say anything. Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. He naturally understood that this girl's words meant to solve all his problems. But at present he wouldn't go berserk so easily with a woman wearing clothes. In a situation where he didn't go berserk, his self-control was still quite strong. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't respond, Audrey Bach also felt a little awkward. However, she didn't care. Instead, she introduced the situation in Chicago to Jiang Hai. Speaking of Chicago, the first thing that came to everyone's mind was probably the Chicago Bulls. This was different from whether one liked basketball or not. The Chicago Bulls were the first to be promoted by the NBA. With Jordan, these two brands had become the symbols of the NBA. Even people who did not watch the NBA would have heard of these two names. This was the power of David Stern. However, those who knew the United States would know that Chicago was not a good place to live. Chicago was the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, second only to New York and Los Angeles. However, compared to New York and Los Angeles, Chicago was far behind. For decades, Chicago was ruled by the Gray Gang. Unlike New York and Los Angeles, New York was the largest city in the United States. Even if it was for the benefit of their own country, they would not allow Gray Gang to continue growing. On the other hand, Los Angeles was the largest tourist city in the United States. In order to give foreigners a good impression of the U.S., these two places had to be thoroughly cleaned. On the other hand, Chicago was never cleaned up. In the 1990s, Gray Gang was still running rampant in the world. Although it was not as chaotic now, Chicago's economic status was slowly being shaken. At the same time, Chicago was not a suitable place for humans to live. It was nicknamed the Windy City because the wind was very strong. In winter, the cold wind from Lake Michigan could make the temperature drop to -30 degrees Celsius or more. In the summer, because of the refraction of the sun from the lake, the temperature could reach -40 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was huge. Therefore, it was necessary for people to prepare more clothes. To be honest, there were almost no tourist attractions in Chicago. The only famous attractions were a few buildings. The Willis Building, also known as the Sears Building, was actually just one building. In addition, there was also the Navy Pier, Lincoln Park, Grant Park. Just by listening to these names, one would know that there was no meaning in going there. Perhaps in Jiang Hai's opinion, the only thing to do in Chicago was to go and watch the Bulls play. However, the problem now was that the Bulls were also a mediocre team. It was not easy for them to attract an audience. Under Audrey Bach's introduction, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the hotel specially prepared for them by Boeing. This time, the invitation to the test flight was not only sent to Jiang Hai alone, there were also a few other people who received it. In order to match the identity of these people, Boeing prepared suites that were second only to the presidential suite. After receiving the room card, Audrey Bach also took Jiang Hai to the room. "Call me if you need anything. My room door is not locked." Before entering her small room, Audrey Bach deliberately said this to Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai also smiled. "Is there a need to remind me so blatantly?" Shaking his head, Jiang Hai walked into his room. As far as he is concerned, he doesn't intend to flirt outside. The most important thing was that he did not think that Audrey Bach was a good person to mess with. Time always passed quickly. In the afternoon, after a while of surfing the internet and watching TV in the room, it was evening. After Jiang Hai and Audrey Bach had dinner together, Jiang Hai went back to rest. Looking at Jiang Hai's closed door, Audrey Bach couldn't help but feel helpless. She looked at herself in the mirror. I shouldn't be bad. In their line of work, it was normal for them to have some kind of relationship with their clients that no one knew about. So, people did this because they wanted to keep their jobs and make more money? This was inevitable. If Jiang Hai said one day that he wanted to change customer service staff, then with his ability she would have to leave. Pleasing Jiang Hai was also something she should do, but in the current situation, Jiang Hai did not seem to have any interest in her. As for whether Jiang Hai was not interested in women, she knew that it was impossible. As far as she knew, Jiang Hai had many women in his home in Winthrop. From this, it could be seen that it was not that Jiang Hai was not interested in women, but he was simply not interested in her. However, since Jiang Hai was not interested, then she did not have to ask for a rebuff. This night nothing happened. The next morning Jiang Hai left his room refreshed, and then Audrey Bach drove him to the headquarters of Boeing. In the current world, there were plenty of rich people. Naturally, there were also people who bought planes. There were also plenty of aircraft companies. There were hundreds of companies like Cessna, Big Beach, Bombardier, Ernstrom, McDonnell Douglas, and even Honda. They sold private helicopters, multiple private helicopters, half-day fixed-wing aircraft, multi-day fixed-wing aircraft, corporate jets, and so on. There were even many companies in the country that sold aircraft. For example, in Jiang Hai's hometown, Bing City, Hefei was a brand that sold airplanes and not cars. There were also companies like Imperial Capital Kiyuan, Xinfei, China Airlines, Nandu Airlines, etc. But when it came to the top aircraft sellers, there were only two companies in the world. One was Airbus and the other was Boeing. Boeing was an American company, and it was also the world's largest airline company. Almost all civil airliners used to be Boeing's customers. But after Airbus appeared in Europe, Boeing's monopoly was over. Now, most of China's airliners were owned by Airbus. But Boeing, the former giant, was still very popular. Originally, the Boeing company was based in Seattle, Washington in 2001, but for some reason large enterprises and the like all fled Seattle after the new century, just like the supersonic team had also left Seattle. Boeing also left Seattle and appeared in Chicago. Today, Jiang Hai went to Boeing's headquarters in Chicago. After alighting from the car, someone led them to a VIP lounge. There were already some people waiting there. These people had the intention and ability to buy planes. Most of them were above 40 years old. When Jiang Hai walked in, many people looked at him. Although some of them were curious about Jiang Hai's age, some of them were well informed and knew who Jiang Hai was. Although they did not do business with him, there was no need to treat him as an enemy. When everyone was minding their own business, the staff who led Jiang Hai into the lounge gave Jiang Hai an iPad with the information of the airliners on display. Jiang Hai took the iPad and looked at it. This time the airliners were not airliners but commercial airliners. They were divided into two categories. One was the BBJ series and the other was the VIP series. There were a total of 6 airliners. But whether it was in terms of performance or the number of passengers, they were all different. The first aircraft to be displayed was the BBJ series. After Jiang Hai briefly looked at the 6 aircraft models, the staff came over and led Jiang Hai and the others to the runway. If you want to buy an aircraft, you naturally have to sit on it and try it out. They first sat in the basic type of BBJ plane, the BBJ model. Walking in front of the plane, Jiang Hai found that although the plane can only seat 19 people, excluding the pilot and co-pilot, the size of the plane is really not small. Chapter 864. The next test flight is the basic model of our BBJ commercial jet. Under the guidance of a stewardess, Jiang Hai and the others boarded the plane. After entering, Jiang Hai also looked at the plane. This plane was the basic model of the BBJ series. The interior decoration was not very good, but it was not bad either. It was not like ordinary civil aircraft. After all, this was a private plane. The seats were very spacious, just like the first-class business cabins of international flights, not the top first-class cabins. There was a big sofa that could be put down. Everyone had their own space. It did not look crowded. Of course, if you wanted to modify the plane after buying it, it was the buyer's problem. You could directly put a bed here and no one would care. This was your freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, this basic BBJ aircraft is developed from the 737-700 aircraft. It has a range of 11,551 kilometers, a maximum speed of 18 kilometers per hour, and an altitude of 12,496 m. This data was naturally the best when it was tested in 1998. The total length of the aircraft is 33.6 m, the width is 35.7 m, and the height is 12.6 m. The length of the cabin is 24.1 m, the width is 3.54 m, and the height is 2 m. The maximum takeoff weight is 7 tons, and the empty weight is 3.25 tons. Some people will ask, you have already introduced the BBJ-2 and the BBJ-3. Why do you want to introduce the basic BBJ to us first? Let me explain it here. Seeing that everyone was looking at her, the stewardess began to explain. It seemed that she often did this kind of explanation. She was very familiar with it. The stability of this plane has been tested for nearly 20 years. Therefore, friends who like safety, for you, this plane is a very good product. The most important thing is that this plane is also very cheap. Compared with the several planes we will introduce later, this one should be the cheapest. At present, the price of the existing plane is $67.5 million and the reserved plane starts at $65 million. Of course, the price of the decoration is different, so is the price. The stewardess smiled as she touched the plane beside her. Hearing the stewardess' words, Jiang Hai looked around. He had a passenger plane. Of course, it was a second-hand one. As long as it could fly, it was fine. Anyway, he did not expect to earn money from civil aviation because the Tenglong company needed to transport beef. Those passenger planes cost Jiang Hai about $300 million, but the worst commercial plane cost more than $60 million. And most importantly, Jiang Hai could not buy it. First, the journey of this plane was not enough. Jiang Hai flew from the United States to Wuxia, a total of more than 15,000 kilometers, but this plane could only fly 11,000 kilometers, which was too little. There were too few people who could sit. Jiang Hai's family was too big. He Chi Jia Chia Mayunshin Ai Xiaoxi Aphrodite Dana Hilda Becky Sheila Ashiria Bridget Janice Daliana Marian Azalina Raylise Wallace Beliak Valentina Galena, Al and Duran. There were 24 people. This plane could only seat 19 people including the captain. It was too small. Jiang Hai casually glanced at the BBJ-2 and BBJ-3 in the back. He could not help but shake his head. The BBJ-2 was also a 2+19, and it could only cruise for 10,000 kilometers. It was too little. Even though it was a 2+21, it could only cruise for 10,000 kilometers. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai looked at the situation of the 3 planes behind him. Boeing had a total of 6 planes on display today. The first was the BBJ series of commercial planes, and there were 3 different planes behind. They were the Boeing 787 VIP, the Boeing 777 VIP, and the Boeing 747-8 VIP. But the prices of these 3 planes were quite impressive. The cheapest Boeing 787 was sold for $240 million. Looking at this price, Jiang Hai's heart skipped a beat. But even so, this plane could seat 45 people. It was enough, but the range was only 15,200 kilometers. In other words, if he wanted to fly from New York to the imperial capital, he was still more than 100 kilometers away. The 787 would not work. The 777 and 787 were similar, with a range of only 15,000 kilometers. The only plane that Jiang Hai could buy here was the Boeing 747-8 VIP. There were 2 good news about this plane. One was that it was big enough. It had a total of 4,700 square feet, could seat up to 150 people, and had a range of more than 17,000 kilometers. It perfectly satisfied Jiang Hai's desire to fly from Winthrop to Wuxia. So even though there were 6 planes now, Jiang Hai could only buy this one. But the bad news was that this plane was sold for $270 million. But compared to the $240 million of the 787, Jiang Hai was not short of $30 million. After the test flight of the basic BBJ aircraft was over, Jiang Hai went to the staff here and told them that he didn't need to test the next 4 aircraft because he couldn't buy them. If he wanted to buy one, he could only buy the 747-8. After hearing Jiang Hai's request, the eyes of the Boeing staff here lit up. It must be known that this was the most expensive plane sold at the moment. Now that Jiang Hai wanted to buy this plane, they couldn't help but be excited. They immediately arranged a test flight for Jiang Hai. In the whole big plane there were only 3 people, Jiang Hai, Audrey Bach and the guide. Jiang Hai also walked back and forth on the plane. He had to admit that this private plane was more like it. After getting off the plane, Jiang Hai directly decided to buy this plane. This plane cost $25.8 million. Jiang Hai renovated it according to the $22 million, making $28 million. There was a separate big bathroom with a big bathtub for bathing, a big kitchen, a huge dining room, a wine cabinet, a game room and 20 separate rooms. Each room had its own bathroom, TV, bed and everything else. There was also a huge reception room with some chairs for sitting and chatting when the plane landed. Anyway, the interior of this plane had everything that should and shouldn't have. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, this plane could sit at most 40 to 50 people. There was space for 150 people. 40 to 50 people, wouldn't it be fine to play with it? Although Jiang Hai had a lot of designs, they were all very simple. He wasn't a designer himself. Things were fine as long as they were practical. There was no need to make them too gorgeous. For example, Jiang Hai didn't have any of those beautiful suspended ceilings. He just had the simplest suspended ceilings with a layer of wallpaper. That was all. That was enough. After all, this was Boeing's headquarters. After Jiang Hai finished talking about the design and looked at the concept drawings, the people here told Jiang Hai that this plane was very easy to renovate. There was an existing plane now, and the renovation could be completed in less than a month. Jiang Hai first paid 30% of the deposit. 30% of $280 million was $84 million. Jiang Hai didn't even hesitate and directly swiped his card to buy the plane. The remaining 70% would be paid after the plane was delivered. After buying the plane, Jiang Hai stayed in Chicago for another night, but nothing happened that night. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai took the plane back to Boston, leaving behind a helpless Audrey Bach. She really wanted to do something with Jiang Hai, but unfortunately they didn't even hold hands. However, Jiang Hai also told her that unless she did something that threatened him, Jiang Hai was still very willing to use her as a telephone operator. Although she was a little unhappy that she didn't have a relationship beyond friendship with Jiang Hai, she was temporarily relieved after getting Jiang Hai's promise. The main reason why Jiang Hai was in such a hurry to return to Boston was mainly because of one reason. The state government had agreed to the proposal of Jiang Hai and Winthrop Mayor Wallace. They were willing to try to organize tourists from Wuxia to go into the mountains to hunt, but there was one thing. They had to sign up, and they had to be supervised and accompanied by them before they could go into the mountains to hunt. At the same time, some protected species in the mountains had to be written in a report. They couldn't just kill any animal. Jiang Hai didn't expect the Massachusetts state government to agree so quickly. Although the American government wasn't as slow as the Wuxia, they were all civil servants after all. These things were public affairs, so they naturally didn't care so much. They were all fixed salaries. Although it wasn't a secure job, the income wasn't very high, so these people didn't have much passion when doing things. All crows were black in the world. Whether it was in the United States or Wuxia, they all had the same idea. So Jiang Hai was originally prepared to wait for the news for 2 weeks. It might take another 3 weeks. However, he didn't expect that he would receive a reply in 10 days. This made Jiang Hai somewhat unprepared. Jiang Hai, who originally wanted to hang around in Chicago for 2 days, rushed back to Boston after buying the plane and sleeping. After getting off the plane at the Boston airport, Jiang Hai saw Moses Adams, who hadn't appeared for a long time. This black lawyer used to be just a small lawyer. Now, with Jiang Hai's help, his department had a big reputation in the eastern United States. He helped Jiang Hai with the execution and operation of several mergers and acquisitions of other companies. He helped Jiang Hai to contact forged buyers all over the world. Just these 2 major operations made Moses Adams' name spread to New York. He used to be a second-rate lawyer for many years. Although he was capable, he was at most a second-rate lawyer in Boston. He might not even be a third-rate lawyer in New York. This made him very unwilling, so he often went to New York for business. But now it was different. With Jiang Hai's work, Moses Adams' reputation had risen. He was already at the level of Boston's top lawyer. In New York he could be regarded as the top lawyer. He was only a little away from the top. For this he was quite grateful to Jiang Hai. Without Jiang Hai he wouldn't be where he was today. Chapter 865. The American government was actually very poor. They were really poor. They were not crying about being poor. Unlike some county governments, they were always crying that they were poor. In the end, the county government would drive Audi, Land Rover, and so on. They were so overbearing that they were too embarrassed to greet their colleagues. These so-called poor areas were just deceiving ghosts. Perhaps the commoners were really poor, but as for the government officials, the 1 meter higher sky was not an undeserved reputation. Being an official for thousands of miles was actually the truth. However, compared to this situation, the American government really did not have much money. This was not an act. It was true. During the financial crisis, any department in the country could be said to be completely fine. However, the American government went bankrupt one after another, including the familiar White House, California, and so on. This was because the American government really did not have much money to speak of. The American government's finances might be a little watery, but the finances of the states and counties were completely transparent. It was really transparent, so transparent that it made people speechless. Moreover, there were some people, like old men and old women, who surrounded the state government all day long to calculate these things. If a manhole cover cost more than a few $dozen, they would raise their flags and protest. In addition, the governors of the states and counties were elected. There were different parties keeping an eye on them. To be honest, being an official or a civil servant in the United States was not something that people would be willing to do. How much did the state government spend on education every year? Generally speaking, it was 6% of the total income. The highway maintenance cost was 2%. Public welfare took up 6%. Natural resources took up 2%. The police took up 11%. Prisons took up 19%. Drainage took up 9%. Fire and other expenses were calculated separately. Of course, this was only a rough estimate. The situation in every state was different, but it was indeed very transparent. Every single cent was spent on the right place. And to be honest, the salary of these civil servants was actually not that much. Basically, the salary of civil servants at the bottom was about $36,000 per year. It was not even $40,000 per year. The police, on the other hand, were paid more. The salary of middle-level managers was only about $70,000 per year. The governor's salary was between $100,000 and $200,000. Different states had different amounts of money. The governor of California only had a salary of $200,000 per year, not to mention the governor of Massachusetts. Everyone wanted to be an official, but to be honest, if one had no ambition and no power, Jiang Hai felt that being an official in the United States was not a good thing. Even a random civilian in America would dare to point at the governor's nose and scold him for not doing a good job. If this happened in China, what did it mean to be single and not fight for power in the country? It didn't matter if you were rich on the surface or a ruthless person on the surface. Not fighting for power meant that as long as you were a small official at the yamen, if you were to make an enemy of him, he could destroy your family. Of course, there was no yamen now, but the meaning was similar. Unless you had tens of billions of yuan and found protection from the higher-ups, otherwise, a department head or section chief would be enough to ruin your family. This was the difference between an official position and a gold standard. In America, these government officials had to curry favor with the rich. Because they were going to be elected, they had to garner votes. Even if it was just for show, they had to do charity work. His money was being targeted, so he needed some political donations. And where did all this money come from? Of course, it came from the pockets of the rich. It was that simple. This was also why Jiang Hai was so rich that he was the local tyrant in Winthrop even though he did not support any faction. These people were counting on him to pay taxes so that they could pay their salaries. Everything was calculated by percentages and not fixed salaries. The difference between Jiang Hai paying a few hundred million in taxes and not paying a few hundred million in taxes was like heaven and earth. It could be said that from the governor to the county magistrate, the police, the fire department, the retirees, and even the unemployed on the streets, Jiang Hai's money was also included in the unemployment compensation. How could they not curry favor with Jiang Hai? And this time, Jiang Hai was looking for the Massachusetts government to discuss the matter of letting the tourists go hunting. After this matter was reported, it seemed like it passed a hurdle every day. On the first day, Boston agreed to hand it over to the state government without hesitation. On the second day, the state government agreed and sent it back to Boston. On the third day, Boston re-examined it and agreed. On the fourth day, Moses Adams was notified to come over to discuss this matter. It seemed like they were more anxious than Jiang Hai. It was understandable. The hunting season in the Appalachian Mountains was only this period of the year. When the heavy snow sealed the mountains, they would not be able to enter because it would be dangerous to enter, and the prey could only be hunted now. Summer was too hot and there were too many poisonous insects and snakes. Spring was the season for animals to give birth, so naturally they had to be protected. At this time, autumn was almost over, so they agreed to this matter that could increase the state government's income. Moreover, they only needed to find some instructors and supervision. For them this was all fine. Under such circumstances, the two sides hit it off. After Jiang Hai got off the plane in Boston, Moses Adams took him directly to the state government. In the car, he had already told Jiang Hai that the specific implementation and negotiations were almost done. The whole tourist hunt was divided into 3 parts: registration, training, and hunting. Registration was easy. Originally, Mayor Wallace's idea was to pay each person $200. Entering the mountains to shoot a bullet would be $2 and guns would be free just like a gun shop. However, after Jiang Hai heard this, he directly changed the $200 to $2,000. Jiang Hai was well aware of his countrymen's situation. He wasn't a black American, but because $200 wasn't a lot of money, it was only a little more than 1,200 yuan when converted to RMB. It could be said that not many people in his country cared about this amount of money. But $2,000 was different. This was more than $12,000. Of course, this was the deposit for registration, not the real money. If they broke the rules or something, the money would be deducted. If they did not break the rules, then only the basic money would be charged. One bullet was still $2, but Jiang Hai took away the gun for free. After all, this was not a shooting range and maintenance could be done in a short time. It was inevitable that they would bump into things in the mountains. If it was broken, it would not look good for either side. The guns were divided into 3 grades: hunting rifle, shotgun, and semi-automatic rifle. The hunting rifle was $50 and the shotgun was $100, and the semi-automatic rifle was $100. There were no fully automatic rifles. Usually, when they went to sleep at night, the guns would be taken away. It was impossible to stay in the mountains for only one day. Naturally, the guns would be taken away at night by the people on guard duty. Of course, these guns were provided by Winthrop, which was Jiang Hai's gun shop. The income had nothing to do with the state government. In addition, there were local clothes and so on which had nothing to do with the state government. These were all things that Jiang Hai and the others wanted to earn. Of course, taxes were another matter. Taxes were inevitable in the United States. The state government and Winthrop talked about money mainly in 2 aspects. One was the registration fee. Of course, it was not the deposit but the registration fee. Jiang Hai did not plan to take these people hunting for no reason. If they went hunting, it would not be a hunting trip but an outing. Therefore, only the men could go hunting. Each person had to pay $100, which was the fee for entering the mountains. At the same time, they had to pay $50. $20 was for insurance and $30 was for the instructor and training. Jiang Hai and the others mainly talked about the $130. The state government's intention was that Winthrop would provide the site, the hunting license, and the personnel would also be provided by the state government. They wanted 80% of the money, but Mayor Wallace only gave 60%. Now he wanted Jiang Hai to come over and discuss this matter with him. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, 80 to 60% of the money was actually not much. 80% was only $104 per person. To Jiang Hai, this was just a small amount of money. In Jiang Hai's opinion, they would definitely have to play with guns in the mountains. 200 bullets would be considered a small amount. This was $400. If they hunted small animals, they could directly bring them back. If they killed big animals, they could eat them on the spot for free. But if they killed deer or something like that, they would definitely make it into art and bring it back to China. The processing fee was calculated based on the deer. $100 per deer was considered a small amount, so this was $500. In addition to the clothes, Jiang Hai specially bought a batch of military equipment. There were camouflage uniforms, helmets, military boots, canteens, tactical vests, tactical backpacks, and so on. If they were going to play in the mountains, they would definitely need a set. This set was not expensive, only $300. It was less than 2,000 RMB. Was it expensive? Of course not. In China, even 2,000 RMB for a set of camouflage uniforms might not be enough to buy it. This added up to $800. After deducting the cost, Jiang Hai earned at least $600 per person just by bringing these people into the mountains. 10 people would be 6,000, and 100 people would be 60,000. Winthrop now had about 3,000 domestic tourists per month. Each group had 50 to 60 people. If they sent out 2 groups a day, 1/3 of the people would go. That would be a net income of $600,000. That would be $7,200,000 a year, although this was just a small amount for Jiang Hai. This money was more for him to stabilize the region. With this income, not only the county, but also the state government would probably be more grateful to him. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. In his mind, he had already figured out this account. After a while, he would go to the state government. Naturally, he would be the most suitable person. This small amount of money he really didn't care too much. Chapter 866. Have you heard? Winthrop allows us to hunt in the mountains. In the Cowboy Song Bar in Winthrop, 2 middle-aged men were sitting there, drinking beer and listening to country music. On the stage in front of them, there were some impromptu dancers. The whole restaurant was quite comfortable. People who were used to the pressure of urban life could relax here. Even some middle-aged people who came here for fun were willing to sit here at night before going back to rest. To be honest, their days here were like a dream to these people. It was really comfortable. Because they didn't need to rush to places or go to scenic spots, their life in the small town was really timid to the extreme. Of course, those who came for scenic spots and photos would not come to Winthrop for fun. Ordinary tourists had to get up at 3 in the morning if they wanted to go out to sea. If they didn't want to go out to sea, they could sleep as long as they wanted in the morning. Except for Jiang Hai's seaside villa, the other hotels, whether they were private or public, had kitchens to provide breakfast. In the morning they could walk around the town and breathe in the fresh air. They could also walk around the beach or go to the dock to buy some fresh seafood. Under Jiang Hai's control, the price of the seafood was at least 2/3 cheaper than in China. But the fishermen here didn't make a lot of money. A lobster that was more than 1 kilogram was sold for at least 200 yuan in China. But here, $20 was $30 for 2 kilograms. The big lobsters and crabs were all alive and huge. They didn't have the speed of small children at all. A crab was about 8 taels, but such big crabs were $8 a kilogram. Note, it was 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram was about 50 yuan. The big lobsters were $5 a kilogram, which was more than 30 yuan per kilogram. All kinds of seafood were even cheaper. 90% of the cod in China was fake, but here they were all real. The price of the deep-sea cod was even cheaper than the river fish in China. 1 kilogram was about $1.50, which was about 10 yuan. Even so, the fishermen still made more than 30% more than what they sold to fishing companies. Therefore, for some foodies, this was heaven. The beef was ridiculously cheap and the quality was good. In China, steak had to be eaten with pasta. Because it was not enough, here they could eat as much as they wanted at the same price. Of course, they didn't eat the beef in Jiang Hai's manner, but ordinary beef. But that was enough. Zhang Dihai saw the business opportunity here, so he specially asked Jiang Hai to rent a shop in the small town to sell goods from Wuxia. Among other things, the seasonings were quite popular. It could be said that as long as one came to Winthrop to play, the food would not be bad. 99 out of 100 people had to be satisfied with the food to not ruin Winthrop's reputation. All kinds of expensive seafood sold in China were sold at half price or even one-third of the price here. Beef that was popular in other countries was sold for only $5 here. Other than eating, there were also many people who came to play here. There were a lot of women walking around the town's commercial street every day. American clothes of good quality were cheaper than those sold in China. Famous brands had no tariffs and were much cheaper than those sold in China. These people bought cosmetics, computers, clothes, and even some food. After lunch, the men could go to the shooting range to play with guns in the afternoon. They could go to the racecourse to ride horses or swim at the beach. Everyone could also go to the orchards to pick vegetables, participate in the farms and ranches, and order fresh milk the next morning. It could be said that for a place to rest and recuperate, Winthrop's reputation in China was not ordinary. It was the off-season now. Because winter was coming, the flow of people decreased. However, there were still about 100 people coming to Winthrop every day. If it was summer, during the summer holidays in China, the flow of people here would be considered small if it doubled. Winthrop was so good, so the businesses in the small town were also very good. The business of the two oldest bars in the town was extraordinarily good. Cowboy Song and Sea Warrior targeted different customers, but they both made a lot of money. Compared to the first time Jiang Hai came to Cowboy Song, the decoration here was much better than the last time Jiang Hai came here. In the past, when Jiang Hai and the others came here, there was nothing but 2 billiards cases. After all, the cowboys who came here didn't like to play billiards. But now there were 4 billiard tables. There were also some darts in the distance and there was a counting device next to them. Big sofas and good seats were available here. At the same time, there were many Wuxia students walking around in the crowd as waiters. Directly opposite the bar there was a stage. Old Tony had specially invited a country band to perform here every night from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. It brought a different feeling to this small bar. Of course I've heard about it. You know, the family I live in is a hunter. As I said, this place relies on tourism to make money. How could they give up such a good project? After taking a sip of the dark beer in front of him, a middle-aged man opposite the man who had just spoken said with slight disdain, "You don't know I came here last year. At that time there was a deer disaster here. I saw the townspeople here carrying guns and cannons to kill deer outside. I was so excited. At that time I said I wanted to go with them, but those Americans were not at ease with letting us carry weapons. They were probably afraid that we would cause a revolution here." Seeing that he had attracted everyone's attention, the middle-aged fat man said with a smile. Hearing his words, the people around him laughed. "Finally we can go into the mountains. I must sign up tomorrow." After hearing his words, the man who had just spoken clenched his fist. To be honest, Winthrop was fun, delicious and nice to live in, but it lacked some exciting activities. Because there was no scenery underwater and the seabed was very deep, Winthrop did not encourage diving, and it was not suitable for diving. Therefore, there was nothing fun for people who were looking for excitement here. But this time was different. They could go into the mountains and there were many military enthusiasts who were eager to go. "Hey, I heard that this time those Americans are going to train or something. It won't be so easy to go." Hearing his words, the fat man couldn't help but laugh. He didn't seem to care. "Old Zhang, don't be sarcastic. Aren't you going tomorrow?" Looking at his expression, the person who insisted on going just now couldn't help but look at him with contempt, then laughed and said, "How can I not go?" Hearing his words, old Zhang immediately said. Looking at his anxious look, everyone couldn't help but laugh. There were definitely a lot of people who were going to sign up tomorrow. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai slowly woke up from his sleep. He hadn't woken up so early in a while, but today's matter was more or less related to him, so it wouldn't be good if he didn't show up. Jiang Hai removed Qi Jie's arm from his waist and slowly landed on the ground. He glanced at the time. It was 6:30 in the morning. It was about time to pack up and set off. Jiang Hai returned to Winthrop 4 days ago. Because he didn't leave for long this time, Qi Jie and the others didn't feel like newlyweds. After staying at home for a few days, Jiang Hai also received news from Mayor Wallace. The details have already been discussed with the state government. After everything was made clear, Winthrop's hunting trip was also prepared to begin today. Originally, they had been in a deadlock over the division of profits, but after Jiang Hai told them about the real way to make money, Mayor Wallace also retreated, letting the state government take 80% of the profits. They also didn't care about 20%, because the real money came from the surrounding areas. After confirming this big issue, it was easy to discuss the rest, but Jiang Hai didn't have to come here. In 3 days, Winthrop specially emptied a police training ground, and the state government also sent the first batch of instructors. Maybe it was to tell Winthrop that they weren't slacking off, but the first batch of instructors were all retired military officers. They weren't ordinary police officers, but they were all from the front line. It wasn't clear if they had killed anyone, but at least their psychological state was quite good. They must have seen blood before. If anything happened in the mountains, they would be able to handle it. These police officers were actually very willing to come, because it was considered a business trip at public expense, and they would still receive their salary. At the same time, the state government also gave them a share of the profits. Leading a team into the mountains, including the early training, could earn them about $1,000 in 5 to 6 days. How could there be such a good business? Therefore, there were many people who wanted to come. But after all, it was just the beginning, so the state government chose people who were very experienced. As the middleman of this incident, Jiang Hai naturally had to follow the first batch of people. After getting out of bed, Jiang Hai went to the bathroom to wash up, then went downstairs. After breakfast, Jiang Hai found that Belle had been waiting for a long time. "You're here so early. There's still time, do you want to eat breakfast?" Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai realized that he hadn't played with Bei Lu for quite some time. Looking at him now, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel nostalgic. "No, boss, this is an opportunity to make some extra money, I won't let it go." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle chuckled and said. Hearing him say this, Jiang Hai also smiled and sped up his eating speed. Then he activated his shield and went to Winthrop's training ground with him. Chapter 867. Jiang, you're finally here. Driving, Jiang Hai arrived at the police training ground around 8:30 a.m. But at this time there were already a lot of people gathered there. Mayor Wallace of Winthrop was also there. After all, this was the first hunting team, so he had to keep a close eye on them. Beside him stood several people in military uniforms. "Hey, didn't we meet at 9 o'clock? Oh my god, you guys are too excited." After parking the car, Jiang Hai got out of the car. After greeting Mayor Wallace, he looked at the soldier on the other side. I don't remember the state government saying that they would send soldiers here." Looking at the man, Jiang Hai said with some confusion. "Yes, Mr. Jiang, I am indeed just a policeman, but I think this uniform is better for training these people." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man in the military uniform couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, because this person actually spoke Mandarin with perfect pronunciation, and his pronunciation was quite standard, even better than Jiang Hai's. After all, Jiang Hai's speech was more or less northeastern, but this person spoke quite well. "Jiang Hai, you speak Mandarin?" Shaking hands, Jiang Hai also introduced himself, although he felt that this person should know him. "I know you, Mr. Jiang. My name is Roga Decat. I used to study in Wuxia. No, I stayed there for 4 years, so I know a little bit of Wuxia's Mandarin. My team and I will be training these tourists." Hearing Jiang Hai introduce himself first, this person also said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded. "Can you explain in detail the training content?" After getting to know each other, Jiang Hai followed them to the training ground inside. Jiang Hai was still very curious about these people's training methods. "We currently have 5 days in the mountain. On the first day we will show them how to shoot and then teach them how to shoot. On the second day we will do some basic physical training. On the third day we will train to distinguish the dangers in the forest. On the fourth day we will leave in the morning. After staying overnight we will return at noon on the 5th day." After all, this person was not really training policemen or soldiers, so the arrangement was very simple. After hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly nod. In the United States, it was the first time that tourists from Wuxia were allowed to go hunting, but it was common for them to organize hunts here. The only thing to pay attention to was diplomatic relations and safety issues. As for the classes, it was more or less the same. "Very good, let's give it a try." Hearing Roga Descartes' words, Jiang Hai also nodded with satisfaction. Indeed, he had assigned them well. These 3 days of training could allow these people to sharpen their weapons and feel the Buddha's feet, so that they would not be stupid as soon as they entered the mountain. After receiving Jiang Hai's praise, this person also chuckled, and then led Jiang Hai into the training ground. As soon as he entered the training ground, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. He knew that there were about 3,800 tourists in Winthrop. After all, they had never been to the mountain before. Even if they wanted to go hunting, it would be good enough if there were 30 or 40 people. The rest would have to wait and see. However, when he walked into the training ground, he was shocked because at this time, there were at least 300 Chinese people on the training ground. These people gathered in groups of 3 or 5, chatting and chatting. Some middle-aged people even went to the smoking room to smoke. He didn't expect that there would be so many people who wanted to be the first to eat crabs. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little worried and asked Mayor Wallace, "So many people?" "Yes, there are so many people who signed up on the first day and they all paid the security deposit in full." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace was happy and a little worried. He was happy because there were so many people, so the income must be very good, but he was worried because with so many people, it might not be so easy to manage. "There are too many people. When we enter the mountain, let's divide into teams of 20 people." Glancing at so many people, Jiang Hai had to overturn his idea and said to Mayor Wallace. They had to study and divide the road into several entrances. This way, several teams could enter the mountain together, but that was a matter for the future. Fortunately, they still had 3 days to allocate the teams. It seemed that the people sent by the state government were far from enough. "Hey, Jiang Hai is here." Seeing Jiang Hai and the other 3 people walk in, many people pushed their friends next to them and then pointed at Jiang Hai in the distance and said. None of them were unfamiliar with Jiang Hai. After all, it was impossible not to know about Jiang Hai in Winthrop. Jiang Hai, a Chinese person, had a higher status here than Mayor Wallace. Therefore, almost all the tourists knew about Jiang Hai and knew that this guy was rich. They also knew that this guy was definitely not someone to be trifled with. "Do you think we can get money if we kidnap him?" Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, a few young people laughed and said. These guys were rich second generations in China, but they were not the top ones. Of course, they were just joking. "I advise you to give up on this idea. Don't joke around. I heard that Jiang Hai's strength is terrifying enough. Most importantly, do you see the person beside him? Everyone in the town knows him. That person is called Bell Lester. He's from the Triangle State." Hearing this person's words, the person next to him laughed disdainfully and then pointed at Bell, who had been standing guard beside Jiang Hai. He was also the only bodyguard around Jiang Hai that everyone knew. "Is the Triangle State very powerful?" Hearing his words, the rich second generation said disdainfully. "Isn't the Triangle State very powerful?" Hearing what he said, the other people looked at him and said, "Tisk." Hearing these people's answers, the rich second generation couldn't help but snort. Just as he was about to say something, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked back and found that Jiang Hai was standing behind him, looking at him with a smile. Looking at Jiang Hai's smile, the rich second generation couldn't help but be shocked. I'm just making sure. Brother Jiang, do you smoke?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the rich second generation smiled awkwardly, then took out a box of soft cigarettes from his pocket and asked Jiang Hai. "Smoking is harmful to your health, but you have to gather." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said to him. Then they walked to the middle of the field. At this time, many people had gathered. About 10 minutes later, the rest of the people also came over. When they came over, they didn't stand but just huddled together. Even in the eyes of the US military, which is not strict with military discipline, these people are too lazy. "Then I'll start." Although he was a little dissatisfied with the laziness of these tourists, after all, he was not here to train them to be soldiers, so Roca Decatur didn't care too much. After saying a few words to Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace, he walked to the front of the crowd. Everyone looked at the big man coming out and subconsciously stopped talking. "Hello, soldiers. My name is Roca Decatur. From the next 3 days I will be your instructor. I will teach you how to live in the forest, what you can and can't touch, and what you can and can't touch. I will not teach you the correct shooting posture. Otherwise, with the gun in your hands, you may be in more danger than if you don't have a gun." Looking at the people in front of him, Roga Decat began to speak clearly. Hearing the familiar Mandarin, the people here were a little confused, but it was good that they could understand. "Do we really have to train here for 3 days? In my opinion, just give us an M16 each and we can go into the mountains for a round. Do we still need to train for hunting?" After Roca Decatur finished speaking, someone had already started talking. For most of the tourists, going into the mountains to hunt was a very enjoyable thing, but they were not willing to learn here for 3 days. Facts had proven that most people were not willing to go back after leaving the school. "Let me correct your 3 problems. First, you don't have an M16. You can only use shotguns, and old-fashioned rifles. Second, if I let you go into the mountains now, I estimate that at least 30% of you will not be able to come back alive. Third, in the future, please say that you are an instructor. If anyone still has such doubts, please don't say it out loud. If you don't follow these rules, you still have a chance to get your money back. After you start training, you won't have such benefits because other than the deposit, all other expenses will be deducted directly, Roca Decatur said seriously after listening to this person's words. Hearing this person's words, most of the tourists looked at each other, although they did not care about what Roca Decatur said. However, they also knew that it was better to learn more in these 3 days. There were still some people who were smiling mischievously. In their eyes, he had come here and spent money and this was God. How could these people still want to train God? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai sighed. Why did he allow these people to go into the mountains in the first place? Must be a joke. It was not worth it to lose Winthrop's reputation for this little bit of money. Thinking of this, he could not help but look at Mayor Wallace. He wanted to see if he should directly stop this hunt. However, Mayor Wallace smiled and looked at Roca Decatur, who was still standing there. He believed that this man would have a way. After all, he had heard about this man's past. Chapter 868. I'm so tired. After returning to the lodging house, Zhao Zhan couldn't help but cry out. He didn't eat his favorite food, nor did he take a shower. He just lay on the bed and wanted to sleep. Looking at him, his wife couldn't help but walk over and look at him with some heartache. Zhao Zhan was already 55 years old this year. In China, he was considered a bit older than middle-aged people. Currently, he was working as an engineer in a state-run construction site. In their generation, engineers who had the qualifications to build a company were very popular. Even managers who were sent out to work would need a company's experience. And people like him who worked as an engineer in the head office naturally had a lot of benefits. For example, when he went down to patrol, the local authorities gave him offerings, and some suppliers who cooperated with the group gave him offerings. Giving gifts was also a microcosm of Wuxia's civilization. It was an indispensable part. Zhao Zhan was a soldier when he was young and he was a scout. In the era where there were no special forces, scouts were equivalent to special forces, so he had always liked guns and cannons. But after retiring, he didn't have the ability to get guns and cannons. Although he was rich now, he always felt that he lacked some of the vitality of a young man. Last year he heard his old friend say how fun Winthrop was and he was tempted. He had already come here once at the beginning of this year and felt that it was really fun. The most important thing was that he could go to the shooting range to shoot. His shooting skills were still stuck at the time when he was a soldier. At that time, they were carrying a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. Compared to these guns now, was there a difference of just a little bit? Now these rifles were M16, M4 carbine, August, and even AK and Wuxia's 95. To Zhao Zhan this was simply his heaven. After coming here, as long as he had nothing to do, he would go to the shooting range to play. Although it was quite interesting to shoot fixed targets all day long, it was a little boring after a long time. Therefore, when he learned that Winthrop had organized a group of rangers to hunt deer and wild boars in the mountains, he was very excited. When Jiang Hai was young, he helped his fellow villagers kill wild boars. At that time, wild boars weren't classified as second-class protected animals. They were harmful. At that time, the 4 pests referred to flies, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and rats. There was also a saying that the 3 pests referred to wild boars, sparrows, and rats. At that time they killed a lot of them. Even when Jiang Hai was young, people often used bird nets to catch birds in the forest. After no one hunted them, sparrows were still abundant in the north, and wild boars were also rampant in the south. But even if it was rampant, ordinary people wouldn't be allowed to fight, right? Moreover, if ordinary people wanted to fight, what would they use to fight? Where was the gun? Zhao Zhan was also very excited at the thought of going hunting. He made an appointment with a few of his old buddies and went to sign up today. At first, they really didn't pay much attention to the foreigner who could speak Wuxia. Just like his old friend said, they were consumers and consumers were God. But today God was peeling off a layer of skin. At the beginning, the instructor named Luo Jia asked his people to demonstrate the physical fitness training they were going to do today. After all, these people were just tourists, so they didn't have the ability to climb mountains and jump seas. They mainly practiced 3 activities. First, cross-country running. They had to bend over and cross a forest. Second, standing shooting posture. Needless to say, this was needless to say. Third, squatting shooting posture. But just these 3 were enough to kill these people. Zhao Zhan was fine. After all, he had a strong desire to play. Moreover, he had been a soldier before, so he was able to endure it. However, his old buddies couldn't endure the first segment. They sat on the ground lazily and couldn't get up. The instructor didn't say anything. He directly called a few policemen over and carried this person onto a stretcher. Then they were sent out of the training field and sent to the hospital. After seeing the patient in the hospital and confirming that he was fine, he directly refunded the money to him. He told him that with his current physical fitness, he couldn't go into the mountains, so he wouldn't earn the money. At that time, the person was dumbfounded. He wanted to go back, but sorry, he couldn't. Indeed, consumers were God. But when the other party didn't earn your money, what kind of God were you? After hearing this news, many people who wanted to be lazy subconsciously shut their mouths. They came here to have fun in the mountains. In the end, they were chased out. Not only could they not go, but most importantly, they were embarrassed. Wuxia people cared most about their face. Losing face was more important than anything else. Many people had been telling themselves that they had endured the pain. However, even if the amount of training was very low, it had exhausted most of their physical strength. Like Zhao Zhan, there were many people who had gone home. Today, the business of the bars was much worse. Looking at her husband's appearance, Zhao Zhan's wife felt distressed and helpless. Look at how old you are. Why are you still acting tough? It's dangerous to go into the mountains. Otherwise, I don't think you should go in. Looking at Zhao Zhan, his wife massaged his sore arms and said, "It would be strange if he wasn't tired after carrying a gun for a whole day. No, it's not like you don't know how rare this opportunity is. We are going to the forest to hunt deer and wild boar. If we send these photos back, old Li and the others will be envious. I heard from little Jiang that if we hunt a deer, we can cut off its head. Then he will let the Native Americans make it into a specimen for us. We can bring it back to China and display it in my study room. TSK, just thinking about it makes me crazy." When he heard his wife say that she was going to give up, Zhao Zhan, who was lying on the bed, suddenly became energetic. Then he said with a serious face. In the end, he even felt a little happy. "Then you go. It's a good opportunity for you to exercise." Hearing her old man's thoughts, Zhao Zhan's wife couldn't help but sigh. This guy, he is so fat and he wants to hunt deer? It's more likely that he will be beaten by deer. Hey, you don't understand. By the way, hurry up and buy me a set of camouflage clothes, a helmet, a tactical vest, and military boots. Hearing his wife's words, Zhao Zhan also shook his head proudly. What does a woman know? But at this moment he suddenly remembered something and immediately asked his wife to buy it. Hearing what Zhao Zhan wanted to buy, his wife was stunned. Are you going hunting or going to war? Looking at Zhao Zhan, his wife couldn't help but ask, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hey, don't worry about that. Go, these Americans are lazy. It won't take long for them to close. Seeing that his wife didn't want to move, Zhao Zhan was also a little anxious and hurriedly said. Under Zhao Zhan's urging, his wife reluctantly left the house and borrowed the resident's bicycle and rode to the town. But when she arrived at the outdoor goods store in the town, she found that the outside of the store was full of people. There were young people and some middle-aged women like her. Seeing this, she couldn't help but be a little confused. After parking the bicycle, she saw a middle-aged woman she was familiar with and went over. Sister Lu, what are you doing? Looking at these people, Zhao Zhan's wife couldn't help but ask with some doubts. What else can we do? Buying clothes. Isn't it because of the trouble in the mountains? Hearing the words of Zhao Zhan's wife, Sister Lu couldn't help but sigh. Her husband also signed up to go hunting in the mountains like Zhao Zhan. After returning home today, he cried out in pain, but he didn't give up and forced her to come and buy clothes, which made her angry and amused. My husband is the same. By the way, why do we have to line up here to buy clothes? Listening to Sister Lu's words, Zhao Zhan's wife smiled helplessly, then looked at these people. Why are they lining up here to buy clothes? These are all here to buy clothes. You have to take the form that your old man signed up and go in to get a number. Then they will call the number and sell the clothes. Just as Sister Lu said, a young man took out a set of clothes with an excited face. This set of clothes was divided into several parts. A camouflage uniform, a helmet, a pair of military boots, a tactical vest, a canteen, and a belt for the legs. All of these things added together made for a serious pile of items. Young man, these are the things you want to buy? How much are they? Seeing the young man take out the things, Sister Lu couldn't help but stop him and ask him. Although these people who came here to play were not lacking in money, they were used to being careful, so it was better to ask. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man also stopped. Andy, these are the things you want to buy. Guns, maps, magazines, bullets, and so on. They will be distributed when we enter the mountains. These things cost a total of $420. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man also said with a smile. So expensive, more than $400, equivalent to more than 2,000 yuan? Hearing the young man's words, Sister Chi couldn't help but secretly click her tongue. In fact, even Zhao Zhan's wife suddenly felt a little reluctant. Expensive? Auntie, you said it the other way round. These things are expensive? Haha, Auntie, look at this uniform, it's from the United States Marine Corps. The elbow and knee pads are sewn onto it. Not only is it wear-resistant, it's also very protective. Most importantly, it's not too hot to wear and breathes. Just this uniform alone is worth at least 3,000 yuan on some domestic military forums. The helmet, tactical vest, and military boots are all the most authentic military products. I just checked on the internet and it's less than 8,000 yuan in the country. Don't even think about it. I just posted it online and someone already offered 8,300 yuan to buy it. If it wasn't for the fact that one person is limited to one set, I really want to buy more. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 869. This Luo Jia has some skills. Jiang Hai couldn't help but say to Belle, who was beside him, as he looked at the people on the field. He originally thought that these unruly people would cause some trouble, but now it seemed that the state government and Mayor Wallace had their reasons for believing in Luo Jia. This Luo Jia used to be a member of the Marine Corps. He participated in the war between Vietnam and Iraq. Because of a suicide attack in Iraq, half of the entire team died. He was a little discouraged, so he retired from the army and returned to Boston, where he became a police officer. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also said seriously, "Wow, there's such a thing? No wonder Mayor Wallace trusts him so much." When it came to the armed forces of the United States, the police department was the FBI and the CIA, and the military department was the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps. Even if Jiang Hai was not a military fan, he had heard of this before. To be able to enter the Marine Corps, this Luo Jia was not an ordinary person. It turned out that this guy really did have some skills. On the first day, Jiang Hai wanted to give up on the program, but after 3 days there were only 240 people left. Nearly 60 people couldn't take it anymore and quit the training. However, these 240 people were much more spirited than they were 3 days ago. Of course, they didn't have the aura of a soldier. After all, they had only trained for 3 days. It was good enough that these people could stand straight now. And these 240 people were all wearing the camouflage uniforms that Jiang Hai and the others entered. Jiang Hai didn't lie to them. These clothes were indeed military products. The United States was different from China. In China, military products were not so easy to see. This was because most of the things were mainly for the military. In the United States, the military and civilian industries were actually mixed together. The American arms giants all appeared in the world in the form of companies. If the military wanted something, they would put forward an idea. For example, if the military wanted to fight in the desert, underwater, cold weather, and so on, after the request was made, these arms companies would go back to their own companies to research. They would not go to the National Academy of Sciences or something like that. When the deadline was up, they would bring out the research results. If the military picked something, it would be a jackpot. It was as simple as that. In addition to supplying the military, this company also sold to the outside world. For example, the civilian version of those firearms. Who do you think produced them? These military uniforms were exactly the same as those of the United States military. The only difference was that Jiang Hai didn't have epaulets or collar badges. With these, he was actually a real soldier. The camouflage uniform, belt, military boots, tactical vest, leggings, and water bottle were all fitted according to the standards of the Sea Nation Marine Corps. Moreover, they were the latest AOR camouflage. After 2 days of showing off in China, this set of clothes had become very popular. The price had been raised to nearly 10,000 yuan per set. However, it only cost $420 to buy it here. Of course, $420 was enough for Jiang Hai and Winthrop to make a lot of money. Because Jiang Hai bought these clothes in bulk, each set only cost $160. The rest was profit. Jiang Hai was making money and the tourists were happy. That was enough, wasn't it? These days, many people came to Jiang Hai to say that they wanted to buy a few more sets. However, Jiang Hai was using muscle marketing. If they didn't sign up, they couldn't buy it. As for the 60 people who didn't insist, they would rather give up the $150 registration fee and buy the clothes. As for the first batch of people who didn't sign up, they were also rubbing their hands and waiting for the second batch. Today was the 3rd day of training for these people. Tomorrow they would enter the mountains. Therefore Luo Jia wanted to teach these people what they could and couldn't touch in the mountains. Apart from snakes, spiders and centipedes, which were obviously poisonous, ordinary lizards couldn't be touched. In addition, there were many plants that couldn't be touched. For example, there were many common plants in China: manjushri, balsam, wheat, flying swallow grass, 8 immortal flowers, evening dew, lily of the valley, and so on. Even morning glory was poisonous. Its stems, leaves, and flowers were all poisonous. The most poisonous was its seeds. If you accidentally ate them, you would vomit, have diarrhea, have bloody stools, urine, and so on. There were also acacia beans, southern sky bamboos, calla lilies, and so on. These were all poisonous. If Luo Jia didn't say it, even Jiang Hai wouldn't know, let alone these people. Many old people were willing to grow flowers in the mountains, especially those whose wives had retired. They liked to grow flowers because they had nothing to do. However, these people really didn't know that these plants were poisonous. Many people even had grandchildren at home. They had already decided to throw away these flowers when they went back. It was too much of a scam. For them, learning this kind of knowledge could be considered as earning some money. After class they left early. However, before they left, Luo Jia divided them into groups of 20 people. There were a total of 13 teams, and each team was accompanied by 3 policemen and an interpreter. They also had GPS, satellite phones, and so on. Tomorrow morning they would take a car and enter through 13 different entrances. Tomorrow morning they would gather here at 8 o'clock sharp. If they were late, they wouldn't bring him. Jiang Hai was a little worried, so he would follow the oldest team. With him and Bell, the policeman could relax a little. After all, it was their first time entering the mountains. No one knew what would happen after entering the mountains, but it was still a try. Early the next morning, when Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the field with their shields, the 26 people were already divided into 13 groups of 20 people. The police were also ready. After Jiang Hai arrived, his shield was left here. He and Bell got into one of the cars and set off for the Alabama mountains together. The car that Jiang Hai and the others were in was a modified F-150. In fact, the other cars were also modified from F-150. This car was really cheap in the United States. More than $20,000 could buy a new car. Obviously this car was not new. A second-hand car only cost a few $1,000s. As long as it had not been hit hard, this car was quite sturdy and had good off-road performance. The modification was very effective. At least the old men around Jiang Hai were quite excited. After getting in the car, they had been taking photos. Although they couldn't go online because the mobile phone card in China was different from the network used abroad. Unless they turned on global communication, they couldn't even make a phone call. Young people might be willing to turn on their mobile phones, but these old men couldn't. So they took photos now, and when they returned to the place where they lived tomorrow, they would use Wi-Fi to send the photos. But to be honest, even if they turned on roaming, it would be the internet in the US is famous for being slow. It's just like the 4G internet in China. It doesn't matter how many gigabytes it is. In terms of speed, South Korea is the fastest and China is the second fastest. So don't say that everything abroad was better than in China. At least in terms of network, express delivery, and so on, it was far worse than in China. After taking photos, an old man sitting next to Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai, "Little Jiang, have you been to the mountains before?" Jiang Hai and the others divided these old people into groups, mainly based on age and familiarity. If a few people knew each other, they would be divided into a group. If a few people were from the same family, they would be divided into a group. If they were not from the same family, they would be divided according to age. They were all in a group in their 20s, a group in their 30s, a group in their 40s, and a group in their 50s. Those above 60 were not allowed to sign up, so a group in their 50s was the limit. This grouping was also to avoid trouble, and at the same time to let everyone have fun. And I have been there. Hearing the old man asking him, Jiang Hai also nodded and said to them with a smile, "Is it fun in the mountains? Are there any large beasts? What's there after going in?" Seeing that Jiang Hai had gone in, the uncles here all asked him. These people were still relatively close to Jiang Hai. Everyone knew that Jiang Hai was rich, but Jiang Hai didn't seem to have the bad temper of the nouveau riche in China. Instead, he was very polite and kind. He was worried that these old people wouldn't have fun, so he came to accompany them into the mountains. So these old people's impression of Jiang Hai was quite good. If it wasn't because they knew that this guy was a very lecherous person, they even wanted to introduce their juniors to Jiang Hai. It's just a normal primitive forest. Our vehicles have to stop outside the forest because there's almost no road for vehicles to move forward. It seems that only my off-road vehicle can move forward in the entire town. After entering the forest, you'll see a lot of trees, grass and animals. However, we can hunt some of them and some of them we can't. After entering the forest, we just need to listen to the police. But you can rest assured that there will be enough prey for you to hunt inside. Looking at these excited uncles, Jiang Hai smiled and told them in detail about the Alabama mountain range. Jiang Hai had already entered this mountain range 6 or 7 times. Although it wasn't the same as his own courtyard, at least there wouldn't be any problems inside. Of course, this was the Alabama mountain range. If he went to a strange place, he would have to bring his family's little white and little yellow first. In the forest, these two guys were quite fierce. Chapter 870. The car soon arrived at the place where Jiang Hai's team was going to enter the mountain, because there were too many people this time. Therefore, in order to avoid bumping into each other in the forest, they entered the mountain from different places. The uncles in Jiang Hai's car maintained a state of extreme excitement all the way. When the car stopped, they also became excited. Next, we are going to enter the mountain. Everyone come and get your equipment. After the car stopped, Jiang Hai also got out first. After translating the words of the 4 people sitting in front, the uncles also lined up and walked over. Before entering the mountain, they had already applied for the guns they needed. Many people asked for rifles. After all, compared to shotguns and hunting rifles, Wuxia people preferred rifles. In addition to rifles, 2 people also asked for hunting rifles. When they asked for hunting rifles, the people next to them were still laughing at them, but now when they saw the hunting rifles, they could not help but lick their lips. It seemed that hunting rifles were also good things. They were going into the mountain to hunt, not to fight at the front line, so the guns they asked for were very old models. For example, the rifle Jiang Hai's team was the M16, the oldest model, the one that was replaced after the Vietnam War. There were many problems, but this gun was enough to enter the mountain. Naturally, they used the civilian version 5.56mm bullets. There were only 5 bullets in the magazine and they could not be shot consecutively. They were the kind that could only be shot once. Each person was given 5 magazines, plus a box of 200 bullets. After they returned, they would know how many bullets they had used. As for the shotgun, it was indeed much more powerful than the rifle. The hunting rifles that these people were given were double-barreled hunting rifles that fired deer pellets. Each pellet was as thick as an adult man's thumb. The rows of pellets hung diagonally on their bodies like Lamborghini. They looked much more powerful than the civilian version of the M16. For a while, the 2 uncles who got hunting rifles kept taking photos, making the people next to them envious. In addition to the guns, the police also gave them a lot of things such as mineral water. However, they were required to put it in a water bottle. Plastic bottles were not allowed to be brought into the mountain because they were afraid that the tourists would throw them away. There was also a Swiss Army knife. Of course, it wasn't the expensive kind. It cost $3. The money was from the state government as a benefit for them. They could bring the knives back to China. There was also a set of quick heat rations for military use, which would come in handy if they couldn't find any prey. After everything was prepared, everyone was ready to enter the mountain. Alright, everyone get ready. We're going to enter the mountain. Before we enter the mountain, I'll repeat my requirements. No one is allowed to run around casually, touch anything, or leave the team. If you need to go to the toilet, call us. You're not allowed to leave quietly because we won't know if you go to the toilet. It's very likely that we'll really leave you behind. The trees in this forest are very dense and we can't see anyone within 10 meters. If you shout loudly, it's very likely that you won't attract us but beasts. Looking at the uncles in front of them, the police officer who was sent in front of them had been explaining the rules with the help of an interpreter. After hearing the man's words, the uncles couldn't help but nod, indicating that they understood. After seeing that they almost understood, the police also led the team into the forest. Jiang Hai and Bell were at the back to prevent anyone from falling behind. Walking into the forest, the uncles were so nervous that they didn't talk much. Indeed, the forest on this side of the Alabama mountains was very scary. Because of the lush vegetation, as soon as they entered the mountain, they basically couldn't see the sun. There was a kind of gloomy feeling everywhere. There were thick straw mats under their feet. These mats were made of withered grass and fallen leaves. When they stepped on them, they would sink a few centimeters deep. When they lifted their feet, they would find water and even some insects. Many of the insects were told by Roga de Carter that they were poisonous. So when they saw these insects, they were also a little scared. Along the way, these people walked carefully in front. Even if it was hot, no one took off their helmet or anything like that. Instead, they had been paying attention to the situation around them. After walking for about an hour, the police in front stopped at a clearing in the forest that had been cleaned up. Everyone take a break here first. You can take off your helmet but you can't take off your shoes. You can sit for a while. Hearing the police officer's words, the uncles here breathed a sigh of relief. Then they all sat on the ground. They finally understood why they had to do 3 days of physical training first. Otherwise, they didn't know how many people would fall behind on the road ahead. They used to climb mountains in China, but the mountains in China were completely different from the ones in the Alabama mountains. There were roads made by people. Even if it was a dirt road, it was actually not very difficult to walk. But here there was no road at all. In the forest, there were deep and shallow steps. If they didn't go through training, they would be lucky if they didn't get sprained. However, although they felt a little tired, they felt that it was worth it. This experience was enough for them to brag about when they went back. Next, we will enter the depths of the forest. This is where we will be hunting. Because most of the animals here are protected, I will not allow you to shoot as you wish. If you discover a herd of deer or wild boars, I will call you. Only then can you hunt. You are not allowed to shoot other animals. If you insist on shooting them, that is fine. But the United States is the same as China. If you shoot wild animals, you will be sued. Looking at these uncles sitting here, the police officer in front couldn't help but say to them. After hearing what the police officer said, many uncles who had other thoughts couldn't help but restrain their thoughts. If they only had a problem with Winthrop, then it would be fine. If they were sued in the United States, then the loss would outweigh the gain. After resting here for half an hour, everyone set off again. They had to rush to a small stream to rest at noon. If they didn't leave now, it would be too late. Although this team was a team with preferential treatment, they couldn't be too slow, right? After walking for almost an hour, at around 11 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived at the place where they were going to camp. The stream wasn't wide, but it flowed very fast. Jiang Hai glanced at it and saw that there were no fish in the stream. It seemed that they had to go to the forest for lunch. After removing some gravel and sprinkling insect repellent, the police officer led everyone to a place where they could eat lunch temporarily. Then the police officers set up 2 shelves with pots that could be used to cook things. Seeing that they were done, Jiang Hai also told 2 of the police officers that he and Bell would bring another police officer to hunt. After that, Jiang Hai and the others were about to leave. But before leaving, the uncle who had been talking to Jiang Hai stopped Jiang Hai. "Little Jiang, are you going to go hunting?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the uncle said with a face full of excitement. "I'm going to get you some food." Hearing the uncle's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. There was nothing to hide. "Can we go with you?" When he heard that Jiang Hai was really going hunting, the uncle here asked him eagerly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's first thought was to refuse, but after thinking about it, it seemed that it didn't matter. "You can go, but you can't take a gun and there can't be too many people." Looking at this man, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said, Okay, just me." Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, the uncle here couldn't help but laugh. Then he went back and gave the gun to a person he was familiar with, and then followed Jiang Hai into the forest. "Little Jiang, I didn't find any wild animals along the way, is it reliable?" Following Jiang Hai, the uncle here said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also patiently explained to him. "This is just the periphery belonging to the buffer zone between wild animals and humans. After this stream, you will be in the real mountain, so there are not many wild animals, plus there are too many of us. Some animals see us from afar and flee into the mountain, so except for birds you can't see anything." Jiang Hai looked around and explained to the uncle. Just now in the car, this uncle's name is Zhao Zhan. He is an engineer in China and used to be a soldier. His foundation is not bad. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Zhan said, "Oh," to show that he understood, but at this moment, Jiang Hai suddenly waved his hand and motioned for everyone to stop. Then he took out a metal cube from his backpack. As Jiang Hai's hand shook, the metal cube instantly became a metal bow. This is the bow that Jiang Hai specially ordered a while ago. The maximum pulling force was 320 pounds. Most people wouldn't even think about it. It was terrifying. Arrows could be shot up to 500 meters away. Of course, if they were shot that far, they wouldn't be accurate. However, at a distance of 300 to 400 meters, the lethality was still quite high. Seeing Jiang Hai take out the bow, Zhao Zhan also stopped talking, but he has been looking around and didn't find any prey. However, Jiang Hai slowly took out his own retractable arrow and placed it on the bow. After aiming, he instantly pulled the bow to its limit and shot the arrow horizontally. The arrow flew past, and not long after, the bushes on the other side exploded. Screams continued to ring out. Jiang Hai and the others also quickly walked over through the grass. Walking to the front, Zhao Zhan saw a big bird with its mouth pierced through. It was lying on the ground struggling, and the blood kept flowing out, making it have no strength to stand up again. But it is worthy of being a wild animal. It has lost so much blood, but it is still not dead and has not given up. Its vitality is really strong. Chapter 871. This bird is really big. Looking at the big bird that was still fluttering on the ground, Zhao Zhan couldn't help but rub his hands and said with some surprise. Hearing Zhao Zhan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then walked to the front of the big bird and directly twisted the big bird's neck, then pulled out the arrow, wiped it, and threw it into his backpack. Let me do it. Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to take the big bird, Zhao Zhan immediately came over to greet him. He wanted to help Jiang Hai carry the bird. Jiang Hai didn't mind, so he handed it over to Zhao Zhan. But as soon as Zhao Zhan touched the bird, Zhao Zhan was shocked. He saw Jiang Hai carrying the bird with one hand and thought that the bird was not heavy. Indeed, the bird's weight was quite deceiving. Because the feathers on the bird's body would expand, it looked very big, but in fact, it was not that big after the feathers were removed. Another reason was that most bird bones were hollow because this was conducive to flight, so a bird with a big skeleton may not be heavy. But unfortunately, Zhao Zhan didn't know what this bird was. When he held it, he couldn't help but be shocked. This is a wild turkey. It is already an adult. It seems to be 25 kilograms, about 50 kilograms. Uncle, if you take it back, you probably won't be able to walk in the afternoon. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also smiled and then took the bird back. Seeing Jiang Hai take out the wild turkey, Zhao Zhan couldn't help but smile awkwardly. But soon he had the idea of taking a photo. He had seen this wild turkey after coming here. Because many ranches and farms in Winthrop Town would raise this thing. Americans really like to eat wild turkey just like how Northerners like to eat dumplings. As long as it was a new year, they would eat wild turkey here. They would eat it for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and New Year's. In fact, they had nothing to eat except wild turkey, but it had to be said that wild turkey was really popular in the United States, but Wuxia people came to eat this thing for the novelty. Because Wuxia people were more accustomed to eating chickens from Wuxia. The meat of these chickens was more tender and more flavorful, and although wild turkey was thinner, it was also very hard and not very good for digestion. So Zhao Zhan and others had seen wild turkey before, but it was the first time they saw wild turkey. Wild turkey was like an enlarged version of a turkey. Generally, domesticated wild turkey could grow to 10 kilograms, which was about 20 kilograms. However, the wild turkey could grow up to 30 kilograms and it could fly. Moreover, it was particularly fierce. Otherwise, these chickens would have been eaten by carnivores a long time ago. They couldn't run fast or fly high because of their granny appearance. The fighting power of an adult wild turkey was not inferior to that of a coyote, so this creature was really not easy to deal with. But when it came to humans, these guys couldn't do it. Jiang Hai carried the wild turkey and returned to the camp by the river. Zhao Zhan naturally went to show off the photos he had just taken to his old friends. This made the uncles quite unhappy. So before Jiang Hai cleaned up the turkey, they deliberately came over to take a picture with the turkey. They wanted to make up for it, right? After taking a picture, Jiang Hai cleaned up the wild turkey. At this time, the policeman also came back with 2 rabbits and a freshwater base. It seemed that he went downstream. After cleaning up the wild turkey, the rabbits, and the base in the small stream, there was no good cooking method here, only boiling and roasting. The 2 rabbits and turkey legs were roasted, the fish and chicken were boiled, and 2 pots of fish soup were made. The chicken inside was enough for everyone to eat. As they applied the seasonings they brought, the aroma of the meat began to hover in the campsite. Zhao Zhan and the others also had a big appetite. After a while, the meat was ready. They also had a good meal. After eating, they cleaned up the garbage here and buried the leftover bones in the soil. After a rest, Jiang Hai and the others continued to move forward. After crossing the stream, even Zhao Zhan and the others clearly felt that there were a lot more wild animals around, and they were not so afraid of people. From time to time, some birds on the branches would look at them. In the distance, some rabbits, wolves, and foxes would flash by. At first, everyone was very surprised. They had seen rabbits before, but wolves and foxes were wild, and not many people had seen them before. They were curious and scared. Although it was just a coyote about the same size as a rural dog, it was a wolf after all. An uncle took a picture of a coyote, but he was proud of it for a long time. This was a pure wild one. However, before entering the mountain, Roga de Cat had said that all the carnivores in the Appalachian Mountains were protected species, and they were not allowed to hunt. If anyone dared to hunt them, they would be kicked out of the team and sent back to Winthrop. Moreover, they would be sued. Therefore, they just looked around and sighed. The environmental protection in the United States was really good. As they walked, they looked around. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Just as the policeman in front was about to take them to set up camp, the policeman in front suddenly waved his hand and everyone stopped. Then he motioned for everyone to walk slowly. Looking at his movements, although the uncles here did not know what was going on, they all bent down and walked slowly to the front. Not long after, they came in front of a patch of grass. Jiang Hai also looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a herd of deer. When Jiang Hai looked over, Zhao Zhan and the other uncles also saw it. In an instant, they were trembling with excitement. Although they were going into the mountains to hunt, they couldn't say for sure if they would be able to hit it. However, they were able to touch it. This was also a good opportunity. This herd of deer was not small. Zhao Zhan and the other uncles also saw it. It was mainly made up of white-tailed deer, and there were also reindeer, moose and elk. These deer might have been too comfortable at this time, so they did not notice that there was a group of people lying in the grass in the distance, aiming at them. There are about 60 deer in this herd and 40 of them are adults. Our target is the adult deer. If we kill the youngest deer, we are not responsible for cutting off the head and transporting it, so it is useless to kill the youngest deer. Now let's divide the deer. Don't get mixed up later. Looking at the deer in front of them, the interpreter also translated the leading policeman's words. Hearing the policeman's words, although the uncles here were nervous, they slowly calmed down and waited for the distribution. Soon each of the 20 people was given a deer. Of course, it was also according to their wishes. Some people wanted the white-tailed deer because its antlers were very beautiful, just like the sika deer. It was the kind that was forked, the kind that had a big sharp fork. Some people wanted the reindeer and some wanted the moose. The reindeer's antlers were also forked, but much wider, like a large piece of coral. The moose's antlers were a large piece of root, and then there were sharp thorns on the top. Could be said that they were quite unique. But no matter what kind of antlers it was very difficult to find them in China. Here they were lucky. The 20 people here divided the deer. Jiang Hai and the policeman naturally had no interest in these things. With the policeman's order, they fired. The 20 people also pulled the trigger, but unfortunately they had only practiced for 3 days, or to be exact, 2 days. This level of accuracy was still quite unreliable. When the gunshots sounded, the deer over there were not stupid. When they heard the first sound, they directly jumped up and then fled in all directions. Seeing these deer flee, the people here did not care so much. They picked up their guns and began to shoot, but unfortunately, it was almost impossible to hit the running deer. Especially people like them who had not touched guns much. After 5 bullets were used up, they changed the magazine again. By the time they ran out of bullets, the deer had already run away. There were many deer that were shot, but basically there were no fatal injuries. If they were not shot in the butt, they were shot in the back. These deer bounced away. Although these places hurt, they were not careless because these deer had already developed antibodies in their bodies. They would be fine after resting in the forest for a period of time. As for the more than 60 deer, only 3 of them were left behind. Yes, the 20 people fired at least 300 bullets, but only 3 deer were hit. It had to be admitted that this was a little embarrassing. Especially those who were holding rifles. Of the 3 deer, only 1 was hit by a rifle. The other 2 were hit by a shotgun. There was no other way. The deer were shot in a large area and the rifle was only an eye. It was difficult to hit these deer. According to the previous allocation, the police still remembered who shot which deer. They had already said that the deer that were allocated were their own. After the shooting, no matter if the deer was shot by a person or not, the deer would be his. This also put an end to the possibility of stealing the deer. Looking at the owners of the 3 deer that had been marked and celebrating loudly, the people who didn't manage to hit the deer couldn't help but sigh helplessly. This opportunity had been placed in front of them, but they didn't grasp it. Who could be blamed for that? Looking at the police over there, they went over and bled the deer. Then they sealed the things in the deer head first. When they returned, they would be specially made into specimens. It was not that there were no deer head specimens in the country, but they were all made of deer skin, bones and stuffing. They were not real deer heads. But this thing was made of a real deer head. The 3 people over there were so excited that they did not know what to say. Looking at the 3 people over there, the other 17 uncles felt quite uncomfortable. It was a pity that they did not shoot the deer. Chapter 872. Little Jiang, do you think we still have a chance to hit a deer? At night, in the predetermined road camp, simple tents had been set up, and the guns of these uncles had been put away. A few bonfires were burning and a fragrant venison soup was stewing on top of them. However, the atmosphere in the camp was at two extremes. One side was very high while the other side was somewhat depressed. There is a chance. After we get up tomorrow we will stay in this area until noon. There should be a chance to hit a deer. If we don't hit one by noon, then you can only blame it on your bad luck. Hearing Uncle Zhao Zhan's words, Jiang Hai smiled. He removed the root of a mushroom, cut it into several pieces and then threw it into the soup pot. Don't think that Jiang Hai threw in an ordinary mushroom. This thing was actually a very expensive fungus. Its scientific name was Boletus. This thing was not cheap outside, especially this thing was wild. In addition to Boletus, there were also Hericium erinaceus, Matsutake and so on. It could be said that along the way Jiang Hai had picked a lot of delicious food. Smelling the venison soup in front of him, Jiang Hai had a little appetite. Unfortunately, the people around him sighed. In fact, it was understandable that these people did not hit a deer. After walking for a day, Jiang Hai and the others encountered a large herd of deer. There were about 60 of them. 20 people shot at 60 deer, but the result was that only 3 were hit. Seeing this result, Jiang Hai laughed. If they had not practiced for 3 days they might not have even hit 3. But no matter who hit them, these 3 deer had their own masters. The police went up and cut off the deer's head and then sealed it. After cutting off about 30 pounds of meat from the deer, they threw the deer's body into the distant forest. They were not afraid that any carnivores would smell the blood and find them, because they had enough weapons. At the critical moment, although these people could not shoot accurately, there were still 20 guns. Even if they encountered a wolf pack made up of hundreds of wolves, they could still escape with 99% of their lives. Human beings were the most destructive existence in this world. Moreover, there were no wolf packs in this mountain now. At most, there were some coyotes, foxes and the like which posed no threat to them. After cutting the venison, they rushed to their own campsite. They arrived at the campsite around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, pitched their tents, fetched water, lit a fire and cooked the venison. After a series of things, it was already night before they knew it. However, being in the forest was different from being outside. Here the moon couldn't be seen. Everyone was sitting around the 4 bonfires, waiting for Jiang Hai to finish cooking. Zhao Zhan and the other uncles who had a good relationship with Jiang Hai came to Jiang Hai's side. The other 3 bonfires had people who had hunted deer and were bragging about it. Only Zhao Zhan's side didn't hunt anything. Sigh, it's really F***ket up this time. I clearly had a chance. I saw my bullet hit that guy's ass but that guy was fine. Damn it. Hearing Jiang Hai say that there really was a chance, Zhao Zhan couldn't help but blame himself. Before they hunted, they always thought that hunting was actually very simple. Look at the prey, raise your hand and shoot. After all, this was how it was played in TV dramas and movies. But obviously this was not an easy thing. They were deceived. Animals were not stupid. Basically, even if it was an old hunter, if the first shot didn't hit the prey's vital point, then the possibility of catching the prey was very small. This was also why hunting had to be done with shotguns. The range of the shot was like a deer bullet. Maybe one shot would hit the prey's vital point, and then the prey would be left behind. Of course, the place where the prey was shot had to be dug out and thrown away because it was full of small steel balls. The meat there was already rotten and there was no way to eat it. If I had known, I would have chosen a shotgun. Hearing Zhao Zhan's words, an uncle next to him sighed and said, "If I don't hit it, I will sign up again after I go out." Hearing his words, another uncle next to him said seriously. Hearing his words, 2 other uncles couldn't help but agree, but more uncles sighed. They only came here to play for a week or half a month. These 5 days were almost wasted. If they came here for another 5 days they wouldn't have enough time. If they wanted to hunt again they would have to wait until the next time. But the question was, when would the next time be? You can't sign up after you go out. You have been in the mountains and your physical strength has been overdrawn. It's just that you haven't recovered yet. After you go home you have to lie down for a few days. It's impossible to sign up without at least a week's effort. Also, you may not have such an opportunity every year in the future. The autumn hunt is only held in autumn. As long as it snows you can't enter the mountains. Spring is the time when everything recovers and Americans don't hunt at this time. It's the same in summer when the cubs haven't been born yet. Next year you won't have the chance to see them again. Although this may be said to discourage these uncles, after thinking about it, Jiang Hai decided to tell the truth. Hearing that there may be no chance to go into the mountains in the future, Jiang Hai felt the pressure around him drop a little. Sigh. With a sigh, these uncles stopped talking. After dinner they went to sleep. Jiang Hai and Belle also went to sleep. Naturally, the three policemen were on night watch. Jiang Hai was only there to help. It was a quiet night. Of course, from time to time there were wolf howls. It was not clear if it would cause insomnia, but from the snoring in Jiang Hai's ears, it was estimated that very few people would suffer from insomnia. After walking for a whole day, these people were tired. At 6 o'clock the next morning, when the morning light shone through the gaps between the leaves and shone on the open space, Jiang Hai and the others had already gotten up. After washing their faces and brushing their teeth, the other uncles also got up one after another. Today they could split into 4 groups and search around. This was also their last chance to hunt deer. After a simple breakfast, Jiang Hai and Belle led Zhao Zhan and the other 4 old men into the distant forest. Jiang Hai walked in front and Belle walked behind. The 5 uncles held their guns and kept shooting at the situation around them. Perhaps it was because their determination to hunt deer moved the heavens. After walking for about half an hour, Jiang Hai raised his hand and motioned for everyone to stop. He heard the sound of a large group of animals moving. Seeing Jiang Hai motioning for everyone to stop, Zhao Zhan and the others also stopped. Then they stared at Jiang Hai without blinking. Jiang Hai quietly walked to the front. Then, under the cover of a big tree, he pulled open the grass and looked into the distance. He had to admit that their movements were really good. In the grass in the distance, there was a herd of deer. Just like what the state government said, the deer herds in the Appalachian Mountains were becoming a disaster. This place was not far from their campsite last night, but there was a herd of deer here. It had to be said that they were not timid. Jiang Hai glanced at it. It was still the same mixed herd of deer as yesterday, but there were fewer deer. There were only about 20 adult deer and a dozen young deer. Jiang Hai waved to Zhao Zhan and the others behind him. These people were also excited and slowly walked over with their waists bent. After pulling open the grass, Zhao Zhan and the others were excited. If they still thought that hunting was so simple yesterday, then they were much more careful now. Their hands holding the guns were slightly trembling. When aiming, aim at the neck. These rifles of yours, other than the neck, lungs and heart, there are no fatal wounds. You can't see the lungs and heart. Don't think about hitting the legs. If you hit the thighs, they will be fine. If you hit the calves, you won't be able to hit them. When deer were eating grass, their legs were also moving. Because they had finished eating the grass, they had to move to eat another piece of grass. Naturally, they had to move. However, these people who had only practiced for 3 days wanted to hit the deer's legs from about 50 meters away. It was actually a joke. Their necks might not even be accurate. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Zhan and the others nodded. Then they half knelt on the ground, picked up their guns and carefully aimed. After Jiang Hai finished distributing the deer to them, he saw that everyone was motioning for them to aim. Jiang Hai also ordered, "Bang bang 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 bang. Bang 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 bang." A series of 5 gunshots rang out. At the moment of the first gunshot, the deer had already scattered in all directions. Zhao Zhan and the others continued to fire bullets. After emptying a magazine of 5 bullets, Jiang Hai helplessly discovered that not a single deer had been shot. Zhao Zhan and the others were quite helpless. What the hell is this? Zhao Zhan was quite helpless. The next time they went into the mountains, they would not use a rifle even if they were beaten to death. Who said that this thing was powerful? How could it be better than a hunting rifle? There's no other way this time. Seeing that these people still didn't seize the opportunity, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly. Guns weren't meant to be used like this. These people used guns directly on their shoulders and then aimed at the other person's neck. Didn't they consider the problem of recoil? The recoil of a real rifle was not as simple as in the game. It required a lot of force to control the gun and shoot in advance. Well, they did not understand this. This time, it was inevitable that they would play in vain. Now, it was also telling them that it was not that they could not hit the deer, but that they did not have the ability to do so. Who could they blame? Chapter 873. At noon, after having a helpless meal, Jiang Hai and the others left the deep mountains and forests. Jiang Hai and his team were quite lucky. At least they encountered another herd of deer. Only one of the other 4 teams encountered a herd of deer, but it was only a herd of deer. There were less than 10 deer in total, and all of them were white-tailed deer. However, they also wanted the white-tailed deer, but the problem was that white-tailed deer were the most difficult to hit. That was because this type of deer was petite, could jump high, run fast, and had a very sensitive sense of danger. Under such circumstances, even some experienced hunters would have a 90% chance of hitting this type of deer, let alone these newbies. Therefore they fired a lot of bullets, but it was useless. On the way back, Zhao Zhan and the other uncles fired a shot from time to time. This was to vent their frustrations. They were also burning guns. Weren't they going into the mountains to shoot bullets? Although it was more expensive than shooting at the shooting range, they didn't care. The gunshots echoed in the forest. Unknowingly, they had also returned to the outskirts of the mountains. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they returned to Winthrop in their respective cars. At the same time, the other 12 teams also returned. This time, every team had a deer head more or less. The extra team was made up of 20 people between the ages of 20 and 35. They had a total of 8 deer heads. These 20 people were enthusiasts of a military forum in China. They came to Winthrop to play with guns. Their scores in the shooting range were also quite high. For uncles like Zhao Zhan and the other uncles, they only needed to hit the target. It was good enough if they could hit the target and hit the 7th ring. However, these people were aiming for the 8th ring, the 9th ring, or even the 10th ring. They also had a good understanding of the gun's recoil. Even so, an actual battle was an actual battle. At the same time, they also encountered 3 waves of deer. It had to be said that strength and luck coexisted. But there were also some teams that were more miserable. Some only managed to hit 1 while others only managed to hit 2. Jiang Hai's team only managed to hit 3, yet they were still ranked 5th from the bottom. One had to admit that these newcomers were really far behind. After they returned, Jiang Hai also had a meeting with the leaders of each team. At the same time, the other police officers also brought the owners of the deer heads to the Native American store. There, the Native American would use the native method to make deer heads into specimens. They could choose to look at them. If they couldn't stand it, they could come back later to collect it. Or, they could leave a domestic address and send it back. Of course, it was all authentic. Regardless of how these people distributed the deer heads, Jiang Hai and the other team leaders also discussed what to do after entering the mountains. It had to be admitted that most people in Wuxia followed the local order, contracts, and regulations. However, there were always some people who thought they were different. Of course, there were more people like this in the United States, but there were also people in Wuxia. Not everyone had the same moderate character. For example, in Jiang Hai's team, if it wasn't for Jiang Hai watching over them, even a few uncles would have gone into the forest to smoke. In the forest, especially in the late autumn forest, smoking was the most important thing. However, the other teams more or less had some problems. That enthusiast team was the only one that didn't have any problems. The other teams all had problems. Some teams had people who left the team to take photos, some wanted to smoke, and some fired randomly after entering the mountains, etc. These embarrassing situations were all recorded. It wasn't until that night when they put away the guns that they were about to go to bed that the interpreter showed them these videos and told them that they would have to pay for these videos. Only then did they remember that there was still a deposit. Some people immediately said that they wanted to change it, but it was useless. They had already recorded it. Seeing that they couldn't get their money back, some people went crazy on the spot. However, it was useless. They were deep in the mountains. If they had the guts, they would leave on their own. They didn't have the guts to fight with these police officers. That was a joke. In the United States, if you dared to fight with the police could shoot you to death. Although these tourists were Wuxia, this was the United States, so they had to abide by the laws of the United States. Although there were no incidents of tourists being shot dead in Winthrop, there were some drunkards who caused trouble and were shot in the hands and feet by the police. These incidents also frightened these tourists. Therefore, when some of them came back, they were obviously not happy and were cursing. Jiang Hai could only laugh at these people. He couldn't do anything about it. This was also the reason why he didn't open up his ranch. You couldn't expect all tourists to be saints. There would always be some bastards. If it wasn't for the development of Winthrop, Jiang Hai wouldn't even want to start a tourism industry. If he didn't have 300 million but 3 billion, he might have really gone to Australia, New Zealand, or Hawaii to buy an island. However, there was also a very important problem. If he were to buy an island, the safety issue would be the biggest problem in the initial stage. Deduct the money where it should be deducted, and ignore the people who should be ignored. We'll do everything according to the contract they signed. Although there are some minor issues, overall, it's still very successful. Tomorrow we'll start the second round of recruitment. I won't be coming then, but when you're training, you must strengthen the education in these aspects. Jiang Hai said seriously as he looked at the people in front of him as well as Roga Decatur. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this trip into the mountains could be considered to have come to a successful end. After everything was arranged, Jiang Hai also returned to his manor. After returning home, Jiang Hai naturally took a good shower and then ate a delicious dinner made by Chia. Then he hugged his beautiful wife and concubines and went to sleep. He was too lazy to care about such a heavenly life. It was a quiet night. The next morning, the hunting news spread to the tourists in Winthrop. It instantly caused an explosive effect. Half of those who didn't go and those who were watching went to sign up early in the morning. They didn't care about the small amount of money. What they cared about was the honor of being able to hunt a deer. Of course, most people didn't manage to hunt a deer, so they were elegantly ignored. This was because they heard from those who didn't manage to hunt a deer that there were plenty of deer in the mountains. Therefore, in their opinion, they would definitely be able to hunt one. People were like this. They always had their own foresight. In layman's terms, it was easy to think positively. No matter what others did, as long as they did it themselves, they would definitely succeed, especially when there were people around them who had succeeded. Therefore, on the second day of these people's return, there were as many as 730 people who signed up for the training in the town. However, some of them couldn't be accepted because many of them had just entered the mountains but didn't manage to hunt anything. They were unwilling to give up, so they came again and wanted to enter the mountains again. However, these people were all persuaded to go back because they had just entered the mountains and needed to rest. If they wanted to join the training, they could only do it the next time they signed up. Excluding these people, there were about 500 people who signed up. There were young people, middle-aged people, and uncles in their 50s. Mayor Wallace was very happy to see the situation in front of him. At the same time, the other instructors he had prepared in advance were also in place. The second batch of training began. At the same time, they also distributed the rules of deducting money. After entering the mountains, they would be deducted $100 each time. After smoking in the mountains, they would be deducted $1,000 each time. At the same time, before entering the mountains, they would be searched for cigarettes. Cigarettes were absolutely not allowed to be brought up the mountain. After entering the mountains, if they didn't listen to orders, casually talked back to the instructors, or even dared to fight, they would be deducted $2,000 and sent back to town. These rules were very strict, so there probably wouldn't be too many people who would commit crimes in the second batch. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai, because he wouldn't be following the second batch. At this time, he had returned to his original state at home. To be honest, Jiang Hai really liked to laze around at home when he had nothing to do. What could be more comfortable than this? No matter what other people thought, Jiang Hai was living like this and he was very happy. Unknowingly, the days slowly passed. Suddenly, when Jiang Hai woke up one morning, he found that the grass in his field was covered with a layer of frost. Looking at the layer of frost, Jiang Hai knew that winter was coming. At this time, Robbins Garcia and the others were working hard to harvest the grass. Some of the grass was for Du Feynman, some for Luke Shan, and some for themselves. All of this had to be done before it snowed. Although Jiang Hai wasn't very smart, this was his home after all, so he had been helping out these few days. Last year, when there were only 5 cowboys, Jiang Hai and the others were already very busy. Now that there were 8 cowboys, Jiang Hai and the others naturally became faster and faster, trying their best to harvest as much grass as possible. Under such circumstances, Winthrop's first snow slowly drifted down along with the Siberian cold air. When it snowed, there were some who were happy and some who were sad. Those who liked it were mainly tourists who were heading south, because they rarely saw such heavy snow. Perhaps because Winthrop's environmental protection was good, the snowflakes were white and big, somewhat similar to the snow in Ice City when Jiang Hai was young. Now, the snow in Ice City was basically gray, and the environmental pollution was too serious. Those who were sad were naturally the tourists who wanted to go into the mountains to hunt, because they knew that the instructor had always said that as long as it snowed, this project would be over. This was because the snow would seal the mountains and it was not a joke. Chapter 874. Jiang Hai, do you want to eat biscuits? I just made them. Chia smiled and called out to Jiang Hai, who was sitting by the window on the first floor and looking at the heavy snow outside. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said okay, then jumped down from the windowsill and walked quickly to the restaurant on the first floor. At the same time, other people also heard the news and ran over. For most people, the uniformity was something that made people feel helpless. Especially those who once dreamed of walking around the world with a sword and seeing the prosperity of the world, but in the end they worked from 9 to 5, and their wives, children and parents were always there. For most people in the city, every day was the same. Get up in the morning, have breakfast, then go to work. No matter what work you do, rest at noon, go to work in the afternoon, work again and go home in the evening, or go out to play first or work overtime and then go home. People like Jiang Hai and others basically had a family and started a career. They went home to sleep and the next day repeated the previous day. From Monday to Friday it was the same. It was difficult to have passion on Saturday and Sunday. At most, they would go home to see their parents and sleep in for a while. The weekend would be over and then a new round of life would hit them again. This was the reality. For most people, such a life made them numb. There was also a small number of people who did not consider their parents, or did not consider their parents, children, and significant others. They felt that such a life was killing them. Then they wanted to go out, they wanted to go, they wanted to go, they wanted to go, they wanted to see the outside world. They wanted to learn the deeds of some people who became popular on the internet, quit their jobs and go out for a walk. As a result, after a walk, 99% of people would find that they had wasted a long time, and most importantly, they had to start from the beginning. In fact, it was plain. This was the real life. Life was about being born and living on. This was not some chicken soup. It could be said that this was a cup of poison. It was not so easy to use a cheat. Those who had to accept their fate had to accept it. For example, Jiang Hai, if he got this golden finger 10 years ago, he probably would not be him anymore. Jiang Hai had also thought about what would have happened if he had obtained the Dragon Balls earlier. It was just that simple. It was most likely that he would first encircle a piece of land in the country, and then rely on spiritual energy to make his first bucket of gold. Then he would be discovered by some upper-class forces and he would fight with them. In the end, the state machinery would appear and annex the land, but he would obtain some domestic status. He would either help the country stand proudly at the top of the world, or he would be directly dissected for research, contributing to the evolution of mankind. But no matter what the reason was, it was definitely not as good as now. Some people also said that Jiang Hai went abroad after he became rich. This was unpatriotic and had no positive energy. Regarding this, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Everyone pursues different things. Naturally, their approach is also different. Jiang Hai had given up a long time ago. Perhaps it was when his mother passed away. He didn't have any ambitions. Naturally, he didn't have any thoughts of saving the world. He didn't have the desire to help the country unify the world. His only thought was to live well. He was living now, not to let others see that he was living a good life, but simply to enjoy life. It was said that society was the best place to train a person. After entering society, this person might become tactful, or he might not be able to adapt to society. After bumping his head and bleeding, he would become tactful again. However, there were some people, such as Jiang Hai, who had already entered the early stage of retirement. They entered the mentality of retirement in advance. Yes, Jiang Hai was now in the mentality of retirement. No matter how good the scenery was, one would get tired of it after seeing it too much. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't. He felt that his current life was really comfortable. He did the same thing every day. He didn't have to worry about money. He ate delicious food every day and there were countless beautiful women around him. No matter why they came to him in the first place, at least they didn't have any utilitarian thoughts at the moment. Was this enough? Wasn't it? He didn't ask for more ideas. He thought that this was already very good. In the eyes of some ambitious people, Jiang Hai was just mud that couldn't be supported by a wall. With such a high-level ability, he naturally had to seek a higher status. Ambition, this word was sometimes very important. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't have it. He now understood some of Lu Shan's thoughts. Here he didn't have to worry about anything. Here he could enjoy beautiful wives and concubines. Here he could do whatever he wanted all day long. Why would he think about things like restoring the country? There was no need at all because this was similar to when he was the emperor, wasn't it? Now Jiang Hai had some such thoughts so others might get tired of it, but he wouldn't. Have you finished your homework? Walking to the dining table, Jiang Hai picked up a cookie that Chia had just baked. As he spoke, he said to Tarak, who also picked up a cookie. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak raised his head proudly. Of course. Jiang Hai had to admit that Tarak might be a genius in learning. So far, she didn't have any normal contact with learning for a long time. After 2 months of school, 2 months of preschool and 4 months, she had already learned the basic curriculum of high school. Jiang Hai had to admit that the United States didn't have much in terms of applied education. Although Jiang Hai was a bad student, he still remembered what he learned when he was in school. Now that Tarak was in his first year of high school, the things he learned were basically what he learned in the second year of junior high school. The education in the United States was still somewhat different from that in China. There were many school systems in the United States such as 633, 8 to 4, 6 to 6, 444, 534 and so on. But primary school, junior high school, and high school were all compulsory education. Of course, you had to listen to the allocation and go to a school near you. If you want to choose those private aristocratic schools, naturally it was different. But basically, in the United States, except for those who often moved, the more stable people would hardly change schools for their children. Because every school system was different, it wasn't easy for children to integrate back into the school. It was the same in Winthrop. Basically, starting school here was the 6th grade of the town's primary school, the 3rd grade of the town's junior high school, and the 3rd grade of the town's high school. Although these 3 schools were not in the same place, the effect was the same. Of course, this was the most common 633 school. But to be honest, the education here didn't require much memorization. That was why Tarak could learn so quickly. But there were quite a lot of things that required independent thinking and didn't have the correct answer. For example, in the 5th grade here, they had to write papers to discuss whether the United States should participate in World War II, discuss the Civil War, and discuss certain battles. For these things, Jiang Hai felt that the United States should participate in the war. For example, for the first point, if Jiang Hai felt that the United States should participate in the war, why? It was definitely not to improve the international status of the United States. It must be to fight against evil and save the people of the world. It was absolutely righteous and full of positive energy. This was the only answer. But in the United States, there were probably quite a few people who wrote this. The mainstream agreed that the United States should participate in the war to improve the international status of the United States, or to increase the national pride, or to meet the needs of the global development of business and culture. They could also write that they didn't participate in the war and were conservative. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. Jiang Hai looked at the learning level of the 6th grade children here. Even the 3rd grade children in the country could sweep them clean. The level of the 6th grade children in the country here was not a problem for the 2nd grade children. Tarak's homework is under my watch. Why are you still worried? You must know that Chi-Jia is a true genius. When she heard Jiang Hai's words, Chia came out with another plate of cookies and said with a smile. Jiang Hai liked to eat cookies very much. This was probably his favorite type of cookie. There was no other cookie. The first time he ate this was when he was in the 3rd grade of primary school. At that time his family still lived in a bungalow. There was a cake shop next to it. Of course they didn't only sell birthday cakes. They also made some small pastries to eat. It was also the first time he ate cookies. At that time he had never eaten anything with such a strong milk flavor. At that time he didn't even eat fresh milk cake. He only ate cream cake, the kind that was very hard to eat. He even thought that such a small piece of cookie would require a bag of milk to make. However, he realized that he was quite naive at that time. But to be honest, the cookies and meat floss rolls at that time were really delicious. When he saw other children eating these things, it would be a lie to say that he didn't crave them. At that time he really did crave them. But now he could eat whatever he wanted. He had the ability to do so. I know, I'm just asking. Picking up a few more cookies, Jiang Hai smiled and threw the cookies into his mouth. For a while the chewing crumbs flew everywhere, but everyone didn't care. Just as the villa was filled with joy, suddenly the door of Jiang Hai's villa opened, and then Galina, wearing a mink fur, walked in from the outside. These mink furs were naturally bought by Jiang Hai. F***ck artificial furs, Jiang Hai buys animal furs. He supports protecting the environment. He doesn't rely on those animals to make money. But these mink furs are all farmed. If you don't buy these minks, what about those farmers? So those people from the Animal Protection Association are like dog fans. They all stand on the moral high ground of human nature and ask others to do what they want. Jiang Hai will be a ghost to care about them. Let these guys sh*t. He wants to buy, who can stop him? Boss, there is news from California. After shaking off the snow on her body, Galina came over with a document. Chapter 875. Hearing Jalina's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Then he solemnly picked up the document in Jalina's hand and walked away. Of course he also had a stack of cookies in his hand. He ate them while reading the document in front of him. Since he went to Ulan with Azalina to rescue these girls had been protecting Jiang Hai in his career. Although it was a bit shameful to let these girls protect his safety and career, and some male chauvinistic people might not be able to stand it, Jiang Hai felt at ease because this was the meaning of their existence. In addition to protecting Jiang Hai's property and the safety of others, these girls had received 3 orders from Jiang Hai. First, to hunt down Kristen Adis's family. This was 95% completed, but unfortunately it was a failure. Second, to find the exact location of the map that Tarak brought to Jiang Hai when he came out of the forest. Although Jiang Hai had a lot of money, it did not mean that he would not take advantage of it, right? Third, which was also Jiang Hai's biggest worry, he was looking for the mark. Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with the progress of the last two tasks. It didn't take long for these girls to confirm that these two locations were in California, so Jiang Hai put more focus and attention on this land. Today these two things appeared. The map that Taraga gave to Jiang Hai had confirmed the specific location. In fact, it was not very clear that this was California. To be precise, it should be the junction of California and Nevada, the junction of the Sierra Nevada, the Cordillera Mountains, and Yosemite National Park. Of course, this place was not small. It was impossible to find it without actually seeing it. Wallace Shelley had used a drone to look for it, and Layla Scarter had also looked for it personally, but they did not find it. They could only confirm that the underground mine was probably there. As for Bruce David's situation, it was a bit complicated because the report said that this guy was crazy. Crazy? Looking at the record, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Of course, his purpose was not so pure. At the same time, when the girls drank too much, he would tattoo them or do some disgusting things to leave his own mark. But what people didn't expect was that his mental illness worsened last year. Someone found him eating a person, so he was arrested and sent to the police station. After the police determined that he was mentally ill, they locked him up in a prison on the outskirts of Marysville on the other side of Yuba. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jialina thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. Eating people? He is mentally ill. Jiang Hai already had a feeling when he heard the female bartender say that, but he didn't think that this guy would eat people. An inexplicable piece of music echoed in his mind. Please tell me, what is that structure? What else exists in my body? Thinking of this, he looked at the cookie in his hand and felt like he couldn't eat it. I'm thinking too much, but since their existence has been confirmed, we have to confirm it. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai threw the slight discomfort out of his mind, and then began to think about the problem of going to California this time. Now that these two destinations have been found, he has to find a way to solve them. There will probably be some trouble in the mountains, because he didn't know if he would encounter any danger in the mountains. There are a lot of things that need to be prepared, and most importantly, even the professional Lei Lizhi couldn't find the place. Jiang Hai reckoned that it would be a waste of time if he went there himself. However, he had other ideas. Looking at Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang in the distance, he reckoned that with them the chances of finding the place would be higher. As for that mentally ill person, he would think about it when he went there. Then who will go this time? Looking at Jiang Hai, Jialina asked hesitantly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought about it for a moment. This time there must be a lot of people, but there must not be too few. The safety of his own manor, the company, and Wuxia had to be taken into consideration, so Duning definitely couldn't go. Belle Lester alone was enough to make Jiang Hai feel uneasy. After thinking for a while, he roughly decided on a few people. Either Azalina or Jialina would go and command the others this time. Huali Shelley was the web spider, and she was also an intelligence agent this time, so she definitely had to go. Zheng Yijin's side couldn't be short of people, so he left Valentina there. This time the ones going would be himself, Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, Azalina, Jialina, Biriak, Aleppo, and Liz Carter. 5 people and 2 dogs, that would be enough. I'll stay at home. Although I'm also an alpha, Azalina is much stronger than me. She won't have any problems commanding Valentina and Aleppo. Jialina seemed to have noticed Jiang Hai's hesitation, so she took the initiative to speak. Hearing Jialina's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Indeed, although the Alpha's teams were numbered in terms of politics, they were at the same level. Why should Jialina command him when Jialina was a 1-to-1? These women weren't easy to deal with, so it was better to let Azalina command them. Okay, in that case it's settled. We'll set off as soon as possible. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai nodded to Jialina and said seriously. But just as he finished speaking, Jiang Hai's shoulder was tapped. You're going out again? But it's almost Christmas. After being tapped, Jiang Hai also turned his head to look at the person who tapped him. It was none other than Qi Jia. At this time, Qi Jia looked at Jiang Hai with the word unhappy written clearly on her face. Indeed, Jiang Hai had just gone to South Korea and Wuxia not long ago. After coming back, he didn't even stay for 3 weeks, and now he had to leave again. And it seemed that he didn't know when he would come back this time. I have something to do. Besides, there's still more than a month before Christmas. Also, we don't celebrate Christmas. Looking at Chi Jie behind him, Jiang Hai chuckled. These girls around Jiang Hai were very entangled with Jiang Hai, and the most active one was Chi Jie. Now she was also acting like a little boss here. The only one who could resist her was Ai Xiaoxi, but after all Ai Xiaoxi was a girl who didn't even finish college. How could she be the opponent of this senior scholar? So now, at most, she only had some right to speak occasionally. You also know that there's only 1 month left. After Christmas it will be the new year. After the new year it will be the new year. You don't know that I've been very busy recently. No matter what, you are not allowed to go this time. If you must go unless you bring me. Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Jie put her hand on Jiang Hai's, and then said to Jiang Hai. But when she said 4/5 of the words, there was a sudden turn at the end. She said to Jiang Hai with a serious face. I'll bring you? I'm not going to play. Why should I bring you? Hearing Chi Jie's words, Jiang Hai smiled bitterly. This time he was going to investigate the badge and the mine. If there was no accident, if he found the mine, then he would go down the mine. No one knew what dangers would happen there. If he brought Chi Jie, she would be more or less a burden. It would be troublesome, so to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't want to bring her. What? Am I useless? I'm a doctor. If you are bitten by a snake in the wild, stung by an insect, have a headache or have a fever, I will definitely be more secure by your side. At least I can save your life. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Chi Jie raised her head and said with a serious face. Speaking of which, if she didn't mention it, Jiang Hai would have forgotten that she was a doctor and not a teacher. Although she was not an emergency doctor, nor was she a doctor of internal medicine or surgery, she seemed to understand these things. Just like what she said, at least if they met with any trouble in the wild, with her around, they would be able to save their lives. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai trusted her now. He didn't care about showing some of his differences in front of her. Of course, the real life-saving thing was the Dragon Ball. Jiang Hai couldn't tell anyone about it. This had nothing to do with trust or not. If this secret was told to others, it would also harm others. Jiang Hai was prepared to take it with him for a lifetime. Well, then you should also prepare. We may be leaving soon. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai looked at Chi Jie in front of him and said seriously. Hearing that Jiang Hai finally agreed to take her, Chi Jie also clenched her fists and then left happily. Are you really going to take her? You know, the place where we go back may not be so safe. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Jialina said seriously. They were going to explore treasures, not to play. Is it really good to take Chi Jie, a person who has no fighting power? But hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded affirmatively. She is right. It is very important to have a doctor in the team. As for her skills, I will teach her more in the next 2 days. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also sighed. He could only seize the next few days and practice more. At least teach her how to protect herself and how to shoot. Chapter 876. After getting off the plane, Chi Jie looked at the sun hanging high in the sky and couldn't help but chuckle. Phew, the weather here is really different from Winthrop. It's so comfortable, but the sun is a little too hot. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled, then squatted down and tied a rope around the necks of Goldie and Xiao Bai. In fact, this rope was just for show. With Goldie and Xiao Bai's current strength, they could break it if they struggled, let alone bite it off. They could even take the person who was pulling them away by force. The reason why Jiang Hai tied this rope was mainly because he wanted to give others the impression that these two monsters were being restrained by someone. Boss, Biliak has already prepared a place to stay. We still need to buy guns and the like, but these things aren't difficult to get here. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina slowly walked to Jiang Hai's side with her strong legs and said to him with a smile. Although Jiang Hai had already bought a plane, it hadn't arrived yet. Because he had to bring 2 dogs this time, and of course because Jiang Hai was used to taking private planes, he rented a private plane to fly to California this time. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai couldn't bring too many helpers. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that in addition to Goldie and Xiao Bai, he should also bring the mountain lion. After all, this was a very strong deterrent. The snake and the crocodile were now hibernating, so Jiang Hai didn't know where they were and couldn't wake them up. But after all, they were wild animals, so Jiang Hai couldn't bring them over when it wasn't his private plane. So this time he only brought Goldie and Little White. Originally, he also wanted to bring Chirps, but considering that Chirps was also a force to be reckoned with in Winthrop, Jiang Hai decided to leave it there. With Jelena and Chirps guarding his mansion, and Belle outside looking after him, there shouldn't be anyone who would want to cause trouble for him. Jiang Hai brought Azalina, Alfred, Sarah, Chi Jie, Wallace, Shelley, Leslie Carter, and Beliak Trotsky, who was already here. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this small team should have no problems. Well, okay, tell the flight crew to have fun in Los Angeles these days. Let's go. Jiang Hai stood up and patted Xiao Bai and Goldie's heads. He smiled slowly, then led the two guys out of the airport. When the others saw Jiang Hai leave, they also followed him out of the airport. California, also known as the Golden State, the state of gold. In the beginning, people were deceived into immigrating here. The Western development was because there was a considerable amount of gold underground. This state was a state on the western coast of the United States. To be honest, it was very sad here in summer, but in winter, it was the best place for cats to winter. The Chinese were probably quite familiar with this state because it had the City of Angels, Los Angeles, the production center of movies, Silicon Valley, the distribution center of leading brands in the electronics industry, and San Francisco, the Chinese settlement. No matter which one it was, the Chinese had more or less heard of it. After all, there were very few people who hadn't watched Hollywood movies, so they were not too unfamiliar with this big state of the United States. However, a large number of people probably thought that the most important state government in this state should be in Los Angeles. In fact, this was not the case. The state government was located in Sacramento. Yes, it was where the kings were. But now Jiang Hai and the others were in Los Angeles. There was nothing fun in Sacramento. Of course, his main purpose here. It was to have fun. After all, his goal was not in this City of Angels. Los Angeles was a county and also a city. It was the city of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County. But in addition to Los Angeles, there were many other cities such as Long Beach, Glendale, Santa Clarita, Torrance, Pasadena, Lancaster, Palmdale, Elmont, Inglewood, Downey, West Covina, Norwalk, Burbank, and so on. These small cities basically had a population of about 100,000 people. Other than Long Beach, which was considered an extension of Los Angeles, which had more than 400,000 people, there were very few places with more than 200,000 people, unlike Los Angeles, which had more than 3.6 million people. Out of the Los Angeles International Airport, Jiang Hai saw Beliak in a black sportswear and a hat in the waiting hall. He had to admit that this East Slav was indeed quite eye-catching here. She had long, silky blonde hair, a slender figure, and a straight asterisk. Although she was trapped in her sweatpants, her tight but plump upper body, slender waist, and delicate face, which could not be seen clearly, attracted many Americans. However, her aura clearly did not say that she was not to be trifled with, so not many people came to talk to her. Looking at the guy nicknamed White Rabbit standing there, Jiang Hai smiled and walked over with his back facing him. "Hey boss, you're here too." Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Beliak naturally saw them immediately. After saying something to Jiang Hai with a smile, she naturally looked at the people behind him. "Is everything arranged?" Looking at Beliak, Jiang Hai also asked her with a smile. "Of course, no problem." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Beliak also said with a smile, then naturally took Jiang Hai's arm and walked out of the airport. For a while, the people in the airport, especially the men, looked at Jiang Hai with anger in their eyes. Of course, there was no face-slapping scene here, they just looked at him angrily. If it weren't for Goldie and Xiao Bai, maybe they would have some courage, but now, After walking out of the airport, they arrived at the parking lot. Since Beliak knew that a lot of people would be coming to Jiang Hai this time, he specially rented an MPV. Not many people knew about this car. After all, the Alfa wasn't as well known as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and the like. But in the MPV world, this was a very good car. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai also helped Goldie and Xiao Bai settle down, then the car started and headed to the highway outside the airport. In the United States, more than 80% of the highways were free, but there were also some that were charged. Most of these roads led to the residences of wealthy people. This was because these roads were not built by the American government. Instead, they were built by individuals. If you wanted to take this road, you would have to pay those people. This was quite reasonable. Because Jiang Hai said that they would stay here for a while. Why? First, it was because Jiang Hai had not been here before, so he wanted to come and play. Second, it was because Jiang Hai and the others still needed to confirm the final purchase of guns, cars, and so on. Therefore, Jiang Hai and the others planned to stay here for more than a week. As for when they would leave, it was still to be decided. It was precisely because of this that Beliak did not rent a house for Jiang Hai in the city center, but rented a villa in Beverly Hills. It was also because of this that they drove here. After passing through the toll highway, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the fantasy land located west of Los Angeles. Although Beverly Hills was called a mountain villa, it actually occupied a large area and most importantly, it was a city independent of Los Angeles. There was an elected mayor, a police station, a fire department, and so on. They were all independent. Because the people living here were all Hollywood stars and rich people in Los Angeles, the villas and the like were quite luxurious. There were also many people living here, such as the famous Michael Jackson, Madonna, Britney Spears, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, and the basketball star O'Neal. There was also the home of the Chinese star Jackie Chan, the boss of Playboy magazine, Emma Roberts, and so on. Jiang Hai knew that Beckham also bought a house here in 2007 and lived here. After all, now that he had retired, his main area of activity had been planned by his wife Victoria to be in the more business-oriented United States, instead of Europe and the old-fashioned country of England. As the car moved forward slowly, it didn't take long for them to arrive at Jiang Hai's temporary residence this time, in front of the villa. The villa that Biliak rented for Jiang Hai was a two-story detached villa. The villa occupied an area of about 300 square meters, and 600 square meters from top to bottom. There were 3 garages and the villa occupied a courtyard by itself. There was a lawn in front and an open-air swimming pool in the back. Looking at the scenery outside, Jiang Hai was quite fond of it because he liked this kind of quiet atmosphere. After the car drove in, Jiang Hai also took a look at the situation inside the villa. The first floor was the living room, dining room, kitchen, and a large bathroom. Other than that, there were only 2 utility rooms. The second floor was the accommodation with a total of 7 rooms. There was a master bedroom with a separate bathroom, a small kitchen, and a refrigerator. The other 6 rooms were for ordinary people with separate bathrooms, a large bed, and independent air conditioners, televisions, and so on. Overall, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with this room. Jiang Hai nodded slightly and patted Biliak to show his satisfaction. Biliak felt that Jiang Hai was quite satisfied, so he also smiled. Looking at the villa in front of them, Chijie also nodded slightly and then asked Biliak, "Wow, this villa is not bad. By the way, how much does it cost to buy it?" Chapter 877. This house is about $32 million. Hearing Chijie's words, Biliak thought for a moment and said, "Beverly Hills was probably the most expensive place in the entire United States, bar none. Even the villas in Long Island could not be more expensive than here. After all, this was the most famous wealthy area in the United States. Well, it's not a bad idea to buy a house here. We can come over and play in the winter." Hearing Biliak's words, Chijie nodded gently and then said happily. Hearing what she said, Biliak was stunned for a moment, then suddenly remembered that Chijie was also a little rich woman. She had quite a lot of shares in the Chi Group and she had saved up quite a bit of her annual dividends. Adding in the shares, her net worth was about $1 billion. Spending $30 or $40 million to buy a piece of land wasn't a big deal. Moreover, Biliak and the others knew how much money Jiang Hai had. Well, it's not a bad idea to buy a villa here. Jiang Hai naturally did not care about the tens of millions of dollars. Everything was worth $100 million now. Jiang Hai really didn't care about it. It was not a bad idea to buy a house here and come over occasionally to play. After all, in the winter, Winthrop was a world of ice and snow. There was nothing here. It was a good choice to go to both sides. Of course, they only had this idea now. Buying a house wasn't something that could be easily talked about. After settling down in Beverly Hills, Jiang Hai and the others also had a good time in Los Angeles for the first few days. To be honest, California, where Los Angeles was located, Oregon in the north, Nevada in the east, and Arizona in the east. In Jiang Hai's opinion, these states were not suitable for human habitation, because these places were particularly desertified. The world's #1 gambling city, Las Vegas, was in Nevada. What was outside Las Vegas? A desert. Arizona, also known as the Grand Canyon State, was most famous for the Grand Canyon of Colorado. It was a large wasteland in the Gobi Desert. The capital was Phoenix, which was the home of the Suns. Including California, these 3 states were quite desertified. Los Angeles was very good, but outside of Los Angeles, it was very desolate. The grasslands and vegetation did not grow very well. Among the 4 states here, the most suitable one to live in was Oregon. Although the atmosphere in California was not like the Colorado desert, where the temperature was often above 50 degrees, the summer here was also deadly. 40 degrees was not a joke. It was really a temperature that was often reached. It was good to come here in the winter, but to come here in the summer, haha. Even though there was an ocean nearby, it wasn't cool at all. There were many manors and farms in California. But here, the land was very good, and the land, it was very expensive. The only plant that grew well here was grapes. These grapes needed a lot of sunlight, which was why they were sweet. Just like in China, the grapes in Wuxia province were the best because it was sunny and there was little rain. It was the same in California. There were many wine manors in California, and the wine produced there was world famous. But compared to the wine produced in Jianghai's manors, the wine produced there was still a gap. But it was not a good place to live. It was not bad to open a manor and just have fun here. On the first day, Jianghai and the others drove to the Walk of Fame. In front of the Wuxia Theater was the place to leave fingerprints. Jianghai and the others also looked for the fingerprints of the celebrities they knew. But after looking for a long time, they only found Jack Cheng's, which was Jackie Chan's. Other than Jackie Chan's, they did not find any Chinese. This made Jianghai a little puzzled because he had seen a lot of reports in the past, saying that many Wuxia celebrities came to the theater to leave their fingerprints. Just as Jianghai was puzzled, a tourist told Jianghai that if they wanted to find the fingerprints of Chinese celebrities, they could go to the street next to the theater, which was specially for Chinese celebrities to leave their fingerprints. In this regard, Jianghai couldn't help but chuckle. Well, this place was divided into A and B versions. After seeing the Walk of Fame, Jianghai and the others went to a nearby restaurant to eat authentic California steak. The taste was just so. In the afternoon, Jianghai and the others went to Hollywood. It was only because Jianghai was very rich that they could go to the shooting scene to watch it. Of course, now it was mainly a green screen because most of the big productions were done with 3D special effects. Therefore, it was funny to watch it on a normal day, but it was different in the cinema. After going back that night, they rested for a night. The next day, they went to Los Angeles's Chinatown. The Chinatown here was in the city center of Los Angeles, where the Chinese lived. But the Chinese here were basically early immigrants from Guangdong province. The Chinatown of the later immigrants from the mainland was mainly in Meng City, which was called Monterey Park City. That was where the immigrants from the mainland lived. But Jianghai just came to take a look. At noon they had a random lunch at the Wuxia restaurant here. After that, they went to Universal Studios in the afternoon and went back to rest for the night. On the third day, Jianghai and the others went to Santa Monica. Well, this place was really difficult to reach. It had the best beach in Los Angeles. Jianghai and the others came to take a look. The beach and other things made Jianghai and the others sick. After seeing the beach, Jianghai went to the Staples Center, the home of the Lakers and the Clippers. Jianghai bought tickets for 2 games. One was to watch the Lakers. He heard that the core of the Lakers, Kobe Bryant, was going to retire at the end of the season. So Jianghai also came to watch. He hadn't seen Kobe play with his own eyes yet. Speaking of Kobe, Jianghai didn't have much to say about him because Jianghai didn't like him. Although Jianghai recognized Kobe's contribution to the basketball team and his achievements, he didn't like players with this kind of personality and style. Jianghai might look like a big and rough guy, but he actually liked players like Nash more. I feel like the wind is blowing gently and the ball goes in. Blow, blow, my pride and indulgence, isn't it? Although Jianghai didn't like Kobe, he still chose to come and watch one of his games. It was tonight, the game between the Lakers and the Nuggets. The other game was a few days later, the game between the Clippers and the Rockets. This wasn't the first time Jianghai watched an NBA game live. He had watched the All-Star game before, so he was very familiar with the way the game was played. After buying tickets and drinks, he took Chijie and Azalina to watch the game. It couldn't be helped. The others weren't interested in basketball. In fact, these two weren't interested either. However, Chijie knew Kobe and Azalina knew that she had to come because she wanted to protect Jianghai. It had to be admitted that in the Western world, basketball couldn't compete with football in Europe. In the United States, basketball was no match for football. If one had to say where the biggest market for basketball was, it would probably be the Wuxia. In this game, Kobe also started. In the first quarter, the Lakers played well. In the second quarter, when the bench came on, they had some inexplicable collapses. In fact, this was a common problem for the Lakers. Los Angeles, where the Lakers were located, had always been a big city. In the United States, it was the second most commercial city after New York. This city attracted a lot of attention and a lot of players. However, no matter what city it was, there would be times of prosperity and times of decline. Even the Spurs, who had been a hooligan for more than a decade, were a strong team in the playoffs every year. With a little bit of reinforcement, they would be a favorite to win the championship. Such a team had also chosen Duncan. Naturally, the Lakers were the same. He could attract a lot of players, but he couldn't keep any of them. The current Lakers were actually a very bad team. This year they were trying their best to get the #1 pick. Watching the game, it was obvious that Kobe didn't want to retire. He still wanted to improve. However, the problem was that he was the only one who wanted to do so. The current Lakers were basically training rookies and newcomers. Therefore, it was inevitable that they would lose. The opposing Nuggets were not a strong team, so the two bad teams went back and forth. However, in the end, the Lakers were still inferior and lost the game. They welcomed their fourth consecutive loss. Jiang Hai was not a fan, so he didn't feel anything when the Lakers lost. After leaving the arena, he drove back home. After 3 days of playing, Jiang Hai and the others were almost done playing. Now they were just waiting for him to finish watching the Clippers game. Then they would be ready to leave. However, they wouldn't be idle for the next few days. There were still some things that needed to be done. First, they needed to buy a car. Yes, Jiang Hai was going to buy a car again. However, he wasn't going to buy a car for fun at home. He was going to buy a car for mining, a military off-road vehicle. In addition, he also needed to buy guns, bulletproof vests, and explosives. Because no one knew what would happen after entering the mine, it was necessary to prepare everything. Jia also needed to prepare a lot of first aid medicine. In addition, Jiang Hai also had to spare a day to visit the guy named Bruce David. Although Jiang Hai was very concerned about the gold mine, he couldn't put the cart before the horse. The badge was actually the most important thing. Jiang Hai's biggest goal in coming here was to figure out the origin of this badge. His sixth sense told him that this matter was not as easy as he thought it would be. Chapter 878. Boss, you must be careful when you go there. I always feel that there's something wrong here. In Jiang Hai's headset, Azalina said with some doubts. Don't worry, I will run if I feel something is wrong. Don't you know how afraid I am of death? How are the preparations going? Listening to Azalina's words, Jiang Hai also asked her with a smile. It's almost done. There is also an anti-material that will probably arrive tomorrow. After you come back today, go and watch the Clippers game tomorrow. We will enter the mountain the day after tomorrow, Azalina said to Jiang Hai after hearing what he said. Okay, then you just have to hurry up. Jiang Hai said with relief after seeing that Azalina was almost ready. Oh, okay, hee. However, at this time, the sound in Jiang Hai's headset began to ring. He glanced at the phone in the car. There was only 1 bar of signal left. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but step on the brakes. He then looked at his phone with some doubts. What the hell is this? At this time, a pickup truck drove in front of him. It didn't look very fast. Jiang Hai waved at him. Hey brother, what's the matter? He has to admit that because the Chinese have a lot of connections in California, the people here are very polite to the Chinese. Seeing Jiang Hai waving his hand, the black uncle who was driving the pickup truck stopped the car. Uncle, is there any signal interference here? Jiang Hai asked with a smile as he looked at the black uncle. Oh, there is no signal interference here, but if you have anything to say, it's best to say it before you enter the town. There was a strong wind 2 days ago that blew down the signal towers in the town and on the mountain. People only came to the town today to fix it. I don't know when the people on the mountain will fix it. This area belongs to the range of the mountain, so there is no signal. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the black uncle said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile awkwardly. The signal tower fell? Well, I've always heard that tornadoes are common in America, but aren't they always in the central region? Why would there be such a thing in the coastal area? But in any case, Jiang Hai knew what was going on, so he smiled and thanked the uncle. Then the black uncle drove away. Jiang Hai also deliberately turned a corner and walked back for about 1 kilometer. The signal was full. He shook his head helplessly and called Azalina again. After knowing that there was no signal here, Azalina was also a little speechless. However, she could not ask Jiang Hai to come back and go tomorrow or something like that. According to the locals, even they did not know when it would be repaired, let alone them. So she could only ask Jiang Hai to be careful. As for Jiang Hai himself, he did not care very much. His own strength was here. In addition, it was not like there were no weapons in his car. Unless the other party sent a team of dozens of people, otherwise if they wanted to trouble him, it would be him who caused trouble for them. One had to know that Jiang Hai was not a good person. Okay, I know, I'll be careful. You guys be careful too. After saying a few more words to Azalina, Jiang Hai hung up the phone, stepped on the accelerator, and headed toward his destination in the distance. Jiang Hai did not stay in Los Angeles for 2 days in vain. For example, the car he was driving at this time was a very good off-road vehicle. This should even be the best SUV except for limited edition cars, Mercedes-Benz G65 AMG. This time, no one knew what would happen in the mountains. A good car, like a good horse in ancient times, was a necessity. Jiang Hai bought a total of 2 of these cars and both were bulletproof. Of course, they could not be like his shield, which could even defend against rocket launchers. At most, this car could defend against pistols and rifles. It would probably not be able to defend against large-caliber machine guns. But this level was enough. After buying the car, Jiang Hai went to buy a gun. He had a gun license, and because he was a local tyrant in Winthrop, the Winthrop Police Department gave him the highest gun license. Although he was not allowed to carry a gun on the street, and he had to be separated from his gun in the car, there were no requirements for guns. He came here by plane. Since it was not his own plane, he naturally could not bring his own gun. So he bought a new one in Los Angeles. At this time, there were 2 gun boxes under the back seat of his car. There were 2 .50 caliber Desert Eagles in one of them. Jiang Hai usually liked to use this gun. In addition, there was a Scar assault rifle which was loaded with 30 magazines. Although it was semi-automatic, it was quite effective. With these weapons, even if Jiang Hai encountered any trouble, he could go into the mountains and get rid of those who wanted to trouble him. Sometimes people's confidence came from this. This time he was going to the Giant Mountain Psychiatric Hospital. It was located at the junction of California and Nevada. It was not particularly far from the place where Jiang Hai was going to go into the mountains, but the road was not quite right. It was also a branch of the Colorado mountains, so it looked a little desolate. This psychiatric hospital had been around for a long time. It opened here about 50 years ago. At first, it was run to make money, and the patients were all mentally ill in California. It was in the spirit of humanitarianism, but it certainly did not make much money. In the United States, where everything was based on profits, it was not difficult to abandon children and the elderly, especially those with mental illness. Therefore, it was difficult for this psychiatric hospital to receive money from patients. In addition, mental illness was not cute. It was not like an orphanage that could receive donations. No one would come here to see a mental patient. Therefore, about 20 years ago, after the Nasdaq stock market crash in the United States, the director of this hospital went bankrupt and jumped off a building. Then all the patients were transferred away. Since then, the hospital had been abandoned. 3 years ago, a multinational company named Mu Kafu took over the hospital. However, the California government did not want them to run it for profit anymore. Therefore, they became a public psychiatric hospital. Because of its remote location and management regulations, it was specially used to detain those who had committed crimes. It was said that mental patients did not break the law by killing people. Indeed, when they were unconscious, they did not need to be shot for murder. However, no matter which country it was impossible to allow such people to run rampant in society again. This was because the safety of the people would be disregarded. Therefore, those mental patients who had committed serious crimes would be locked up here. While they were being treated, they were also being detained. However, they did not have to do anything. Instead, there were people taking care of them. To put it bluntly, this was actually a prison for mental patients. Moreover, it was not the mild kind of mental patients but the serious kind of mental patients who would kill people. It was not an exaggeration to say that the people here were all perverted murderers. Bruce David, who Jiang Hai was looking for, was here. Following the road signs on the road, Jiang Hai quickly found the way up the mountain. However, he had to admit that there was probably not much money here. The road up the mountain was quite shabby. It was basically a dirt road with only a short section of the road. If it were not for Jiang Hai's SUV, which had the best jumping ability, he might have felt the car scraping the chassis. Along the way, Jiang Hai's car slowly came to the end of the road. From afar, Jiang Hai saw a huge building. This building was the main body of the Jushan Psychiatric Hospital. Because it was built 50 years ago, it looked like an ancient castle. Around the castle was a 2-meter-high wall with iron wires around it to prevent the patients from escaping. The big iron gate at the entrance looked like a prison. After Jiang Hai parked the car at the entrance, a white man with a baton came over and looked at Jiang Hai. "What's the matter?" Looking at Jiang Hai, he asked in a deep voice. "Usually not many people came here. I have to go in to look for someone. This is my note." As Jiang Hai said, he took out a piece of paper from the stack of documents and handed it to the guard in front of him. This note was composed of 2 parts. The first part was a note issued by a Los Angeles police station to let Jiang Hai in, and the second part was a Franklin hidden under the note. "Do you have a weapon?" After calmly putting Franklin into his pocket, the big man's expression became a lot more polite. He glanced at Jiang Hai's car, and after confirming that there was no one else inside, he asked Jiang Hai, "What about you?" "Yes, in the car, I don't have it on me." Hearing the guard's words, Jiang Hai replied with a smile. "Then your car can't go in. Park the car outside, you can go in." Shaking his head, the guard pointed to the parking spot for Jiang Hai. After Jiang Hai parked the car, he walked to the front of the gate. After a small door next to the gate opened, Jiang Hai walked into the Giant Mountain Psychiatric Hospital. As soon as he walked in, he felt a sense of despair. Jiang Hai walked a few steps inside, and a white man in a guard uniform asked Jiang Hai, "Who is it?" Jiang Hai glanced at him. He felt that this white man was really ugly. His messy hair, sunken eye sockets, inverted all face, pale skin and yellow teeth. If he wasn't wearing a guard uniform, in Jiang Hai's eyes, he would be scarier than the patients here. Jiang Hai couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 879. I'm here to visit. Looking at the guard in front of him, Jiang Hai also said politely to him, "You're here to visit? Who are you looking for?" After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guard came over and said with some doubts. Quite far away, Jiang Hai can smell the stench in his mouth and the strong smell of disinfectant on his body. It's almost the same as in the hospital, but thinking about it, isn't this a hospital? "I'm looking for Bruce David." Suppressing the unhappiness in his heart, Jiang Hai looked at the guard and said, "Oh, you're looking for that man-eating pervert? Go over there, let me tell you, that guy is not to be trifled with." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guard here couldn't help but laugh. It seems that this Bruce David is crazy. Even the people here know that he wants to eat people, which made Jiang Hai feel a little disgusted. But even though he felt a little strange here, he still nodded his head as a form of thanks and walked into the castle. And just as he walked into the castle, the guard couldn't help but turn his head and smile ferociously. Then he slowly turned back and continued to patrol. There were cold concrete buildings everywhere. Guards in police uniforms were either patrolling or standing guard at certain places. Doctors and nurses were carrying some equipment and walking up and down the corridors. And looking from the outside of each room is welded with extremely thick steel bars, sealing the windows, and the sunlight can be seen, but that's all. The glass in the room is integral. Jiang Hai looked at it, it should be bulletproof glass, not worse than the windshield of his shield. This kind of defense is understandable for Jiang Hai. Because not only in China but also in the United States, there are many rich people who kill people or commit crimes. They don't want to go to jail, so they make up a story that they are mentally ill when they kill people. The court can't do anything about it, and there will always be some garbage doctors who testify for these people. Under such circumstances, these prisons are their final destination. And although they can save their lives here, Jiang Hai knows that it's better to die than to live here. So in order to prevent the subordinates of these people from breaking into the prison, the defense here is not ordinary. Jiang Hai secretly estimated that he may not be able to break such glass. Even if he can break it, the steel bars are too dangerous. After Jiang Hai entered the door, Jiang Hai found that they seemed to be looking at him, and that gaze made him a little uncomfortable. But after all, this is a mental hospital, so it's understandable that Jiang Hai feels a little strange. Walking to the reception room in front, Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table. Then a young woman in a white coat raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts. Jiang Hai was also looking at this woman. He had to admit that this woman was not bad. She was a typical American golden silk cat. She had long wavy blonde hair. Her delicate facial features were painted with not too much makeup. She seemed to be quite young. She looked like a begonia who had just woken up from a spring sleep. She was really quite attractive. But Jiang Hai did not have any thoughts of flirting with her. Did he know where she worked? She has been in contact with these mental patients for so long, who knows if she will have any problems. "Hello, how can I help you?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the woman in front of him said politely. I'm here to find Bruce David, this is my pass." Jiang Hai said as he handed the pass to the woman. After the woman looked at it and determined that there was no problem, she stood up and glanced outside. "Paul, take this gentleman to Bruce David's ward." As his voice fell, a fat white guard came over and didn't speak. He just glanced at Jiang Hai faintly and walked inside. Jiang Hai also nodded to the blonde woman and followed him into the hospital. Opening an electromagnetic door, the guard led Jiang Hai into a passage. At the end of the passage there was an elevator. When the elevator reached the third floor, it stopped. Jiang Hai also looked outside. The entire third floor is very simple. In front of him is a passage. There are many guards standing on both sides of the passage, and there are many paths in the passage dividing the passage. Jiang Hai may not know the specific structure, but it seems to be not much different from an ordinary hospital, but the protection is stricter. After getting off the elevator, Jiang Hai also followed the fat guard named Paul all the way inside. Along the way, Jiang Hai felt that the way these guards looked at him was a bit strange. 30% curiosity, 20% numbness, and 50% surprise? Feeling the emotions passed by them, this made Jiang Hai a little confused. Why is it a surprise? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai didn't quite understand. Maybe it's because he hasn't seen normal people here for too long. After all, it's quite difficult for them to do this job. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also let go of the thoughts in his heart. He just came to ask Bruce David about the badge. After asking, he will leave. While thinking about things in his heart, Jiang Hai followed the fat guard in front of him to the innermost room in the corner of the 3rd floor. This is it. Walking to the door, the fat guard couldn't help but say a little stupidly, then he took out a set of keys from his waist and prepared to open the door. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Hai also glanced at the door sign outside the room. It indeed says Bruce David. It seems that this time he should find the right person. If you have anything to say, ask as soon as possible. At this moment, the fat guard had already opened the door and motioned Jiang Hai to go in. Jiang Hai glanced at him, then smiled, bowed his head and walked into the room. But just as he walked into the room, Jiang Hai's nose twitched. It was the smell of blood. Yes, Jiang Hai smelled the smell of blood at this moment. When he looked at the bed, his pupils dilated because at this time, a person was tied to the bed. This person looked to be in his 20s. His hands and feet were handcuffed to the bed, forming an X shape. A white cloth was tied in his mouth, but the white cloth was now covered in blood. Looking down, Jiang Hai found that this person's stomach had been opened at this time. His intestines, heart, and liver were all over the bed. The most important thing was that this man was wearing a guard's shirt. At this moment, Jiang Hai also felt a gust of wind behind him. Needless to say, this was the fat man behind him attacking him. Without saying anything, Jiang Hai directly turned around and kicked. What a joke, he had 8 times the physical fitness. With this kick, the fat man was directly kicked out and heavily smashed into the corridor window. His huge weight, coupled with Jiang Hai's strength, smashed the bulletproof glass into a spider web, but it did not break under such circumstances. After dealing with this fat man, Jiang Hai knew that the situation here was not right. He subconsciously wanted to run out, but at this time the guards standing in the corridor seemed to have gone crazy. They shouted incoherently and pounced on Jiang Hai crazily. Looking at the stun batons in their hands and their crazy appearance, Jiang Hai was a little scared. To be honest, although Jiang Hai was fierce, he was still a normal person. At the same time, he remembered that there were so many guards here. If these guards were all like this, even if he had 8 times the physical fitness, he probably wouldn't be able to survive. When a normal person encounters a lunatic, their first thought is not to fight, but to escape. Jiang Hai was the same at this time. When these people ran over, Jiang Hai tore off the key plate from the fat guard's body. He didn't know if there was a backup, but it was always good to tear it off. Then he quickly flashed into the room and closed the door. When he held the door handle, he felt a pain in his palm. Then he saw a needle taped to the inside of the door handle. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse. He was really unlucky. But this was not the time to think about this. Jiang Hai directly locked the door. At this time, the crazy guards had already rushed to the door, constantly roaring, and smashing the door in front of them with their hands and stun batons in their hands. He had to admit that the quality of this door was quite good. These people even used their heads and hands to smashing flesh and blood everywhere, but the door still didn't move. Seeing that it was temporarily safe, Jiang Hai's mind suddenly became sluggish. Jiang Hai didn't know what the medicine in the needle was, but he didn't expect that he could still move so fast with 8 times the physical limit of an ordinary person. This was Jiang Hai thinking too much. The medicine in the needle was a mixture of the highest concentration of tranquilizers and some drugs that couldn't be injected. A little bit was enough to paralyze people instantly. It was already amazing that Jiang Hai could hold on for so long before feeling a little dizzy. Glancing at the guards who were still crazily smashing the door in front of him, Jiang Hai took a deep breath, suppressed his dizziness, and then lifted the heavy wardrobe next to him. This time, even if those people smashed the door, Jiang Hai was not afraid. Just as the door was blocked, Jiang Hai also felt his head getting dizzier and more uncomfortable. He tripped, fell to the ground, and fell into a deep sleep. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.